In the Liu family villa, 7-year-old Yan Yi lay back in the shadow of the fence, put his hands on his head, and threw a strawberry into his mouth. After eating, I still want to finish. I put my finger into the garden to steal another strawberry. Today, the young master came back. Several servants were picking fresh strawberries in the garden behind the Liu residence. The small ears suddenly stood up and Yan Yi stood up and patted his knees in surprise. Stepping on his toes, he jumped over the fence and ran to the Liu mansion. For a child of 7 years old, like a castle towering into the clouds, the pleasant sound of a piano came from a scattered glass window. Yan Yi approached carefully, and then, hoofs, little hands, furry tails, balls hanging from the hips, half hanging on the windowsill, big eyes flashing, peeping in. There was a teenager sitting at a grand piano in a school uniform, his long, smooth hands jumping on the keys, his ears up, his head down, his voice soft. He liked the little prince in the castle. Suddenly, Liu Jingxiang felt something strange behind him. However, he turned around and looked out of the window. Yan Yi fell nervously to the ground and immediately hugged his eyes, his little tail ball trembling. After a while, he realized that he didn't seem to have been caught peeping, so he let go of his hand and saw a cold and handsome young man's face. Liu Shangjin squatted down and touched Yan Yi's soft ears. Little rabbit? Yan Yi stayed for a while, his face flushed red, afraid and shy, huddled together like a small ball with free ears and furball tails, trembling to say, "So nice." Liu Shijin's eyes curved up. He touched Yan Yi's soft hair again. "You are so cute and your face is so soft." Liu Shijin pinched Yan Yi's frosty snow from his face. Only then did I understand what the teacher said idiom blowing can break is. Yan Yi blinked his big eyes. The little face on the left was pinched red. Liu Jin raised his lips and called Jin Ji. He carefully did not dare to move. Suddenly, a palm appeared in front of him. It turned out to be Liu Jingkao. He stretched out his hand and smiled. "Little rabbit, I will protect you from now on." 3 kinds of strong M2 pheromones collide with each other. The overbearing alpha aura explodes and spreads instantly in Zhongling Street. Tourists wandering in Guangxi Lane suddenly stop and follow this oppressive momentum. I don't know where it leads, curious but afraid to approach too. The pressure of high-level pheromones is like a thick cloud that engulfs the city. The owner of the flower shop that Gu Wei had just bought dried flowers happened to come back. The owner was an Omeg. When he entered Zhongling Street, he felt extremely strong pressure. Suddenly, he covered his glands and knelt on the ground in pain. Yan Yi put down the dried flowers and blocked the middle of the 3. "Stop it. Do you want to tear down this street?" Xia Jingshan took the lead and stopped releasing the oppressing pheromone. He sat on the hood of his car and raised his chin slightly to Yan Yi to signal that he was especially obedient. Liu Jingxi glanced at Xia Jingshan. "Why are you here? Your brother told you to go back." Xia Jingshan's eyes immediately became hostile. Xiao Wenying dusted off the dust on his sleeves. "Put your hands in your pockets and lean against the wall. The corners of your lips curl up to reveal sharp canine teeth. Young Master Liu, long time no see. A few days ago on the cruise ship, I saw you in your arms kissing and hugging a little star. Today, this is the little white rabbit who has taken a fancy to my mouth. How can you eat in the bowl and look at the pot?" Liu Jinjin is indifferent to Xiao Wenying's inversion of black and white. However, he is somewhat touched and purses his lips. The light in his eyes seems to have been blown out. When he looks at Liu Jinxi, there is only flatness and loss in his eyes. Sure enough, that time when he didn't answer the phone, he really went on vacation with you on me. He saw Yan Yi gradually fade away from his red worry expression and knew that he began to think about things again. Liu Shangjin suddenly became extremely agitated, stepping on the cigarette butt, walking to Yan Yi's side, pulling his hand and saying to him, "Get in the car, I'll explain to you, it doesn't matter." I'm used to Yan Yi letting go of his hand. In fact, he doesn't feel surprised. When Bai Jing is at home, Liu Shangjin will occasionally bring people back to play. He has already seen how strange it is. Yan Yi turned around and wanted to help the boss move the dried flowers back to the car, but he didn't find Gu Wei's trace and looked around. I found him sitting in an open-air hot pot restaurant 50 meters away, chewing a bucket of popcorn and looking at this side, obviously trying to watch the fire from afar. Yan Yi turned around and felt his wrist tighten. He looked down and saw a sticky spider silk wrapped around his right hand. Then his body was pulled by a strong force and he crashed into Xiao Wenying's arms. Yan Yi pulled his hands and wanted to struggle, only to find that the more you struggle, the tighter you are twisted by the tough spider silk. Xiao Wenying chuckled beside his ear and said, "Don't move, little rabbit. Let go of him." Xia Jingshan suddenly rushed out and released pheromone pressure. Xiao Wenying grabbed Yan Yi's throat with one hand from behind and pulled him back with a teasing smile. "Let's see if this little rabbit can withstand your gravity squeeze." Xia Jingshan really relaxed his strength. His ability 1 and M2 were not aimed at single targets, but at area squeeze. If he released his ability, A loop-eared rabbit omega would be squeezed into a ball instantly. Lu Shijin frowned. He had seen Xia Pingshan's younger brother several times. The lion's temper was even more arrogant than his brother's. This was still the first time he saw him hesitate when fighting fiercely. Xiao Wenying lowered his head and sniffed the light fragrance on Yan Yi's hair. He raised his peach blossom eyes and bent toward Lu Jinwan. This little rabbit borrowed me to play for 2 days. Anyway, it was all something you didn't want. If you approached me again, you would mark him now. Lu Jinmi's eyes seemed to hear the sound of his teeth rubbing. I don't like hearing you talk like that. Yan Yi, who was locked by his throat and forced into his arms, lifted his eyes and grabbed Xiao Wenying's hand tightly around his neck. He threw his long legs on Xiao Wenying's abdomen with his hands tied by cobwebs. This vicious move, the eagle free kick, was several times stronger than the one that broke Yuanmi's leg bones. Xiao Wenying's entire body was smashed to the ground with a thud. The entire ground instantly flew into the air. Xiao Wenying didn't expect that the dormant little rabbit of the gland could still burst out with such a fierce strength. He couldn't prevent it from being swept 8 meters away. Some races had a chance to differentiate when the gland differentiated and gained differentiation ability. Can have additional companion abilities. Spider gecko and other races may have companion abilities while swimming independent of angle, standing on various materials, walking. I saw Xiao Wenying standing on the vertical wall like a crawling spider, lightly stepping on the roof, but the dust made him a little wolf. Nengzhong Yan Yi's face is pale. Hua Dongshi's deputy has just exhausted the gland energy that is not recovered, and the year has just exhausted the gland energy that is not recovered. The year 7 has just exhausted the gland energy that is not recovered. When the gland energy is about to fall, Xia Jingshan catches it. The crumbling body can still see the bruised finger marks on the white skin. On land, Jin Shu disappeared in place, with a series of afterimages appearing on the low roof. The race companion ability rescue captures the target at a speed of 389 km per hour. He grabbed Xiao Wenying's neck and smashed his whole body against the sharp tiles. There was a loud bang, almost as fast as lightning, and the muscles on the arms were outlined in the sleeves, and the celebration in the eyes grew stronger and stronger. Is it not enough to have your godfather's previous experience? Xiao Wenying immediately put a piece of shui silk on the corner of his mouth and raised his eyes to pick up the fresh shui. That rabbit will fall into my hands sooner or later. All of a sudden, he picked up his leg and swept it over the land. The land brocade conditioned reflex picked up his hand and blocked it. The next moment disappeared. The strong pheromone that filled Zhongling Street subsided with the 3M2 Alpha's withdrawal. The tense atmosphere faded out of Guangxi Lane. I'm fine. Thank you. Yan Yi pulled himself out of Xia Jingshan's arms and reluctantly smiled and thanked him. Then he crouched down and tried to move the box of dried flowers to the boss. His fingertips just touched the carton. The cardboard box was suddenly kicked aside impatiently with a clang. Yan Yi picked up his eyes in surprise and saw Lu Jinji staring down at him. Cold face, little ears, little ears. Are you angry? Lu Shangjian leaned over and lifted Yan Yi up fiercely into his arms. Holding Yan Yi's waist, he kissed his lips rudely. When he left, he directly hugged Yan Yi horizontally and walked with me. Put the bunny in the car, close the door hard, and then go around to the driver's seat, turn around and leave. Xia Jingshan's consciousness is 2 steps behind him. Hey, where are you taking him? I can see the car shadow gradually moving away. Xia Jingshan's eyes gradually dim. Forget it, Yan Yi probably wants to go with him too. Is it impossible to catch up with someone who doesn't love him? This handsome guy, do you want to help me carry a box? Gu Wei came over calmly and leaned over to pick up the cardboard box on the ground. He joked that it was really impossible to hire employees to hire rich wives. They might just come to experience life. Xia Jingshan laughed and snorted. You idiot, let me carry the box for you. Do you know who I am? Gu Wei sized him up and rolled his eyes. I don't care who you love. And then a 540-degree spiral, one shoulder, box, humming superstars in troubles, and he's gone. A street of bars, brightly lit bars, unusually empty tonight, with closed doors and only a chandelier lit in front of the bar, empty bottles rolling to the corner. Xia Jingshan fished it back and poured it into his mouth. Only one Alf sat in the whole bar. The whole room was full of alcohol and strong pheromones of M2 Gypsophila. Boss, take a bottle of whiskey. Xia Jingshan leaned against the bar and looked very sober. In fact, his eyes were already drunk. Gu Wei sat on the sofa in the corner and smashed the glands on the back of her neck hard. Can you keep the pheromone away? It's too thick. My glands are numb. As a result, Xia Jingshan held up the bottle of whiskey and replied, another bottle of whiskey will intimidate you. Gu Wei really couldn't help but fall into the sofa and bury his whole head with a pillow to resist the crazy and uncontrolled pheromone of Gypsophila. On the other side, Yan Yi was stuffed into the passenger seat and his power belt was buckled up by Lu Jin rudely and he was locked in the seat like a prey. What are you doing? Yan Yi reached out to loosen Quan Quan's wrist. but a big hand held it in his palm. Lu Zijin, who drives with one hand, has a smelly face and overtakes the car in front of him like a fierce man. Yan Yi's fingers are too tight to open Lu Zijin. It hurts. Please open it carefully. You can't overtake Lu Zijin. He glanced at him from the rearview mirror. Seeing the bruised finger marks on his pale neck, she felt a wave of annoyance and said angrily, "What are you doing?" Yan Yi moved a little away from Lu Shangjin, supported in Quan, and said, "What are you angry about? Even if you don't come, I can still withdraw Lu Shangjin's hand into a fist and smash it hard on the steering wheel. I can fart. His face is getting worse and worse. Your gland has already been priced at $2.5 billion in the black market. When I was not around, I didn't know how to keep a low profile." Yan Yi said a word of hug and turned his eyes away from him. Suddenly, she saw a platinum wedding ring on Lu Shijin's left ring finger, which had been lost for several years. Yan Yi stared blankly at the glass, turned around, and looked at Lu Shangjin's hand for a while before he could prove that he had moved his gaze to Lu Shangjin's cold side face. Suddenly, a car made a sharp turn in front of him. Lu Shangjin suddenly braked and cursed softly. His neck was flashed. Lu Shangjin held the back of his neck and accidentally touched the needle hole of the estrus inhibitor on his gland. He gasped slightly. This is the source of anger and celebration. The natural aggressive gene in the Ulfa Snow solution was awakened. The cunning spider successfully angered him. Yan Yi, carrying in Quan, suddenly swung forward. A box of things in the back seat was thrown to the ground by inertia. Yan Yi looked back at the back seat as if something had fallen. He saw a bunch of roses sprinkled with silver glitter scattered from the flower box. A few petals fell off and were reflected in Yan Yi's light gray eyes. His eyes seemed to be lit up by the headlights behind him, turning into gentle, sparkling water. Yan Yi quickly woke up. He withdrew the sunlight and lowered his eyes to hide his beautiful expression. Is this flower a gift? In less than an hour, the rabbit misunderstood twice, took a deep breath, and swerved into a narrow road to stop at an abandoned park fountain. Lu Jingxi put out the fire and leaned against the pillow. He closed his eyes and Yan Yi hesitated. He bit his lip and said, "Oh." He thought Lu Shijin was trying to throw himself on the road, and as soon as he got out of the car, Lu Shijin got out of the driver's seat. He took out the bouquet of silver roses from the back seat and stuffed it into his arms before he could react. Lu Shangjin picked him up with one hand and held his slender body on the edge of the dried fountain. Yan Yi sat on the edge of the pool at a loss. The rabbit ears immediately filled with snow and turned red and hot. He stared blankly at Lu Jingxia for a second and was stuffed into a large bouquet of roses. Yan Yi asked incredulously, "Is this for me?" Lu Shangjin seemed to have been extremely agitated. His hands were propped up on the edge of the pool where Yan Yi was sitting, trapping the rabbit in a space in his arms like an eagle looking down at the hunting rabbit. "For you, it's all for you." Lu Shangjin bites Yan Yi's soft red lips hard. The eagle gathers its claws and locks the small waist of the white rabbit. It wasn't until Yan Yiruan was trembling gently in his arms that he finally relaxed. Lu Shangjin raised his eyebrows and asked Yan Yi. His eyes were full of confusion. He wiped a drop of saliva from the corner of his lips. At this moment, his mind was blank. His heart was like a tiny string in Yuming. Yan Yi pursed his lips slightly in surprise. He stared blankly into Lu Shangjin's eyes and asked, "Are you jealous? Who said that about me?" Lu Shijin. The little rabbit smiled and hugged the bouquet tightly. Lu Shangjin lowered his head and looked at him. "If you like it, I'll get someone to send you a bouquet every day." He thought to himself, this isn't anything valuable. Yan Yi's smile was diluted by this sentence. He replied softly, "It's good not to use this." He put his thin finger on Lu Jingxin's left ring finger and said to himself, "Did you lose the ring?" Yan Yi's obedience gradually calmed Lu Jingxin's agitated heart. He took out the bouquet of flowers from Yan Yi's hand and threw it aside. Yan Yi let him stick it to his shoulder. Yan Yi was a little reluctant to let go of the bouquet. When he was pressed into his arms, he was immediately filled with the mixed smell of narcissus and tobacco. Kishiki looked down at the glands on the back of his neck. They were still a light, smooth, tender red, emitting a soft, creamy fragrance. The moment his lips touched the glands, a numbing electric current flows into the rabbit's body along the nerves. Yan Yi nervously closes his eyes and imagines that the pain of being pierced by sharp teeth does not arrive as scheduled. Yan Yi patiently waits for his mark. Lu Shangjin only dropped a faint kiss on his glands and loosened it, and then pinched Yan Yi's tender face, which may be caused by racial talent. The face of a 27-year-old man is still smooth like a piece of tofu. "Let's go. Let's go eat." Yan Yi caresses his cheek and looks at Lu Shangjin. He turns around and walks back to the car. Yan Yi picks up the petals that have fallen from his hand and inserts them back into the stacked bouquet. I picked up the bouquet and sat in the back seat. I sat in the corner to avoid the sight of Lu Jingxi in the rearview mirror. There is a card from the florist in the box. Printed on the card is a routine greeting. "What are you looking at?" Lu Jinjin can't see what Yan Yi is holding from the rearview mirror. Nothing. Yan Yi quietly took out the card close to his lower abdomen and folded it in his pocket with the pregnancy test report. He touched his lower abdomen and brought the flower box close to himself so that the baby could smell the roses sent by Alpha Father. Don't send flowers to other Omegas, okay? Yan Yi lowered his head and muttered softly. His voice was too soft to be heard. Lu Jinyi was stunned. In fact, Lu Jinjin had never sent other Omega flowers. He wasn't used to romantic people. Toys that solved needs weren't worthy of his consideration. However, he wasn't used to explaining things, so he just hummed. The garden in front of the villa in Changhui City is tended by gardeners. The whole flower stand is covered with lush windmills and jasmine. When Lu Shangjin came back, it was already the next morning. He drove the car directly into the underground garage. When the car stopped steadily, there was no movement in the back seat. It turned out that the little rabbit was half asleep in the seat with the flower box under his head. Lu Shangjin went around to the back seat and grabbed Yan Yi's arm and put it on his shoulder to carry Yan Yi out. In his sleep, the little rabbit still held the flower box and did not let go. Lu Jinjin held him in one hand and took off his thin finger from the edge of the flower box with the other hand. Brother Jin, Yan Yi holds his neck in a daze. The morning wind is still a little cold. He unconsciously goes to Lu Shangjin. He turns his belly sideways and sticks to Lu Shangjin's body to absorb warmth. Omega without marks always lacks a sense of security. He is used to approaching his beloved Alf. As long as he can get close to familiar pheromone smells, his body will naturally relax. He will unconsciously show his instinct to make Yan Yi bend his head and send the glands on the back of his neck to Lu Shangjin's lips. At the same time, there's a soft courtship pheromone that's ingratiatingly released from the glands. No matter which alpha, it is difficult to refuse such a lovely Omega mark invitation. Lu Jintian's sharp canine teeth are still not down. Instead, he kissed his forehead. You are too weak now. You need to recover. He held Yan Yi's back and raised his spine. How did the little rabbit lose so much weight? Lu Jinjin suddenly realized that the little rabbit that was originally soft is now light as a feather. The training traces of the muscles on the arms and legs have almost disappeared over the years. The face seems to have a layer of unhealthy white. He has not paid close attention to Yan Yi for a long time. Unconsciously, the small free child has become very haggard. He secretly decided to send him to the hospital. Take a look at the underground garage. The occasional few cars are parked in the periphery. The second circle is a dozen limited customization models to block the line of sight. Inside the iris lock compartment. Inside the garage are two large skins with 3-layer bulletproof windshields. After walking for a while, Yan Yi slowly opened his eyes and rubbed the furry ears of his sleeping rabbit in a daze. Lu Shangjin lowered his head to look at him. Did he wake up? Just in time to get home and take a walk. Yan Yi was stunned for a moment and suddenly woke up. They were still in Nanki last night. Why did they already reply to Changhui today? You brought me back? I haven't packed my things yet. Why didn't you ask me to pinch Lu Shangjin's little ear yesterday and ask his assistant to get it? I told the boss that Yan Yi took out his phone and called Gu Wei. A WeChat message pops up on the screen. It's a voice message from Xia Jingshan. Lu Jinmi raises his eyes and asks who it is. Yan Yi calmly handed the phone to Lu Shangjin. It should be Xiao Xia. Lu Shangjin frowned slightly. That little brat was quite concerned about you. A few days ago, when I was talking to Xia Pingshan, he shouted so loudly that I almost went deaf. Yan Yi smiled and said, your Omega is almost 30, and you can still harvest such a young fan brother. Be happy. As he spoke, he sent the phone to Lu Jinxi and gave it to you. I don't want to hear Lu Jinxi's expression. He took Yan Yi's phone away. After inserting him back into his pocket, he contacted Les to see Lu Shangjin's departing back. Yan Yi was a little disappointed. If he marked his glands, he could let other alpha bite him at a distance. It wasn't that inconvenient, right? He bit his lip and secretly denied that his own people could not expect too much. Now, this is already very good. Yan Yi picked up the flower box and caught up with Lu Jinjin. He found that he didn't go upstairs first. Instead, he waited for himself by the elevator. Yan Yi stood beside him and looked at the mirror image of the two people on the elevator door silently. Why are you still holding this box? Lu Jinjin looked at the flower box that was crushed with a small corner and sighed lightly. He took it up and threw it away. Tomorrow, I will ask someone to send a new one. Yan Yi hugged the flower box and tightened his arms. He really didn't need it. This was really good. Thank you. I endured it until it gave birth to insects. I pinched Lu Jinpad and put out cigarette butts and walked into the elevator. Clap fire. Seeing that he was distracted, Yan Yi, who came to deliver the package, was stunned for a moment before realizing that he was talking about himself. So holding the box briskly into the elevator, the rabbit ears secretly jumped to and fro, occasionally being hit on the shoulder by the soft little ears. The face of the land brocade has been a little gentle unconsciously. She grabbed Yan Yi's ear and rubbed it. Yan Yi's cheeks were slightly red and she softly said, "Oh." Yan Yi's expression froze when he walked into the first floor. There were messy takeout boxes on the table. The ashtray was broken into several pieces under the foot of the sofa. Obviously, someone had lost his temper in this room. He looked at Lu Shijin and looked a little embarrassed, but he immediately took off his coat and threw it on the sofa. He glanced at his mobile phone and found a message from Bai Ruijing in the chaotic work report. The child is full moon. Is he free for a meeting next week? When he saw the information, Lu Jinjin called him last week and asked if he was full moon. Bai Ruijing leaned against the wall with his pocket in his pocket. Yes, when you came to our house last time, you also saw my son spreading close. Is it okay? Lu Shijin saw Yan Yi moving his little tail on the balcony. I don't know what he was packing. He felt more at ease. He replied, very busy. I'll take some people to get busy. Yan Yi didn't rush to clean up the mess on the table. Instead, he went to the utility room to fetch a ceramic square flower jar with a loose mouth and filled it with water. He inserted the roses one by one to pose a beautiful pose. The roses are no longer in bud. Yan Yi carefully plucks off the petals. He left his notebook on the second floor of the bar. He has to get it back as soon as possible. Today's score can be added to Lu Jingxin's paper first. After taking care of the bouquet, I took it to the balcony and brushed a little water on the wrought iron flower rack, but I saw dozens of boxes of Timothy hay piled on the balcony. Yan Yi squatted down and took a box. He carefully looked at it. It was free food. Lu Jinshi threw his mobile phone aside. Go out on the balcony and look at the bunny. A moment of heart. Snow Tide bent over to touch a. Yan Yi moved on the butt of the free tail. Yan Yi covered his butt and raised his trousers a little. He covered his tail and sat on the ground with a red face. The robbery hasn't been mopped in days. Don't sit on the floor. Lu Shijin said as he reached out and pulled him up. Yan Yi stood up with a box of Timothy hay in both hands and looked down gratefully. He asked softly, thank you. This is for me. Lu Jinjin remembered that every time he brought Yan Yi a gift, he only wanted to see his expression. He was grateful and shy. His face was calm and gentle. In fact, he was excited. The irritability factor in his blood gradually subsided. Lu Shijin raised his hand and placed it on Yan Yi's head. Otherwise, I only have one rabbit in my house, he said, pinching his ears and sleeping all the way. He went to eat something good. Yan Yi, put the hay box down. I'll do it. You've been driving all night. Go upstairs and sleep. Lu Shijin suddenly grabbed him from behind. She took Yan Yi into her arms, lowered her head and kissed his soft fur ears. She was only a month old when she saw the child. You should like the familiar milk candy pheromones. As long as she was sure that Yan Yi had returned to her side, Lu Jingxin's heart would sink quietly. The anxiety of the past few days would be swept away. Kids? Yan Yi's eyes lit up for a second and then he suddenly woke up. Lu Shangjin was not talking about the child in his stomach, but Lu Shangjin actually wanted to take him to meet his friend. Yan Yi was a little flattered. Is there a lot of people? I'll go change clothes. Lu Shangjin has always isolated him from his own circle. Yan Yi wanted to blend in before, but Lu Shangjin didn't give him a chance. There are quite a lot of people, but there are also Lu Shangjin who you know. I saw the rabbit bouncing back to the room. Yan Yi ran to the closet and opened the closet. Three of them picked a formal and not too solemn waist, but Xiao Shiwei bowed her head and found that it seemed to have been moved. He reached under his pillow and pulled out his treasures one by one. I counted everything, and suddenly a laminated photo fell to my feet. In the photo, two teenagers under the age of 10 had their arms around each other and their faces were filled with pure smiles. Yan Yi picked up his fingertips and wiped the dust off the photo. Lu Shangjin stood by the door and looked at him. Did you touch my things? Yan Yi put the photo under the pillow in the closet. I came here a few days ago to look for something. Lu Shangjin wasn't happy that Yan Yi had separated yours from mine so clearly, but he added that he didn't touch anything else. He just looked at the photo. That's all right. Yan Yi didn't want to annoy Lu Shijin and took out a carrot brooch from his gift box. He kept gesturing at Lu Shangjin's chest and tilted his head to look at him. Are you sure you want to wear this? Yan Yi didn't think there was anything wrong with it. He opened his eyes wide and nodded. The birthday gift you gave me was very beautiful. It was such an expensive thing. Shinji, a man never had the chance to wear it. The heart tribulation is very cute. The heart tribulation is warm. Lu Jinjin barely pulls the corner of his lips. The heart tribulation is indeed expensive. The heart tribulation is long, but the style is too unique. Fortunately, he is a little rabbit. Wearing a carrot brooch is not too ridiculous. It is not easy to coax the little rabbit back. Lu Jinjin also does not want to argue about boring trifles. He likes it. In the lounge on the second floor of the winery, a little guy is babbling nonstop. Bai Ruijing holds his Omega and walks over to feed the butterfly Omega. He holds the child. Baira Weijing, close the door and go out. Baira Weijing squatted down and looked up at the small Omeg sitting on the chair. He laughed and said, I can't see my own wife yet. Mega's white cheeks float with a layer of redness. She unbuttoned her clothes and fed the baby. She frowned and didn't feel comfortable. What's wrong? Pain. Baira Weijing helpless smile wronged. Our little dream is also a baby, said to hold the delicate Omega into the arms while releasing comfort pheromones while kissing his forehead small for essence. To call a nice butterfly. Omega pursed lips pushed the child to Baira Weijing arms. Baira Weijing's neck on both hands cried out. Uncle Rui. Baira Weijing bent down to continue talking about dreams. He pushed him away. Stop it. The guests are almost here. They're here, and they're talking about looking out of a wooden window on the second floor of the winery and seeing a Bentley Continental arrive at the end of the road. Baira Weijing saw the loopy ears rabbit driving at a glance. Omeg. Damn, the land brocade brought the main palace lady. It was too much of a favor, so he took the dream and personally went downstairs to greet Lu Shangjian. Yan Yi Flameout came down from the driver's seat and saw Baira Weijing with a gentle smile. I didn't know that you had children until these years. Baira Weijing immediately stood up straight and held the child in his arms. He saluted Yan Yi. Yan Yi just smiled. He retired for so many years. Don't make fun of me. In PBB base, according to the ranking of combat potential, as a permanent serial number, the serial number does not represent absolute strength, but it can also be used as a relatively stable judgment method. Baira Weijing has taken over the Omeg dream beside him. It's called people. Butterfly Omega well does not recognize life timidity but calmly shake hands with guests. Perhaps due to his birth temperament, Lu Jin took a red envelope to Baira Weijing. Congratulations. Baira Weijing pinched it. There's a bunch of car keys inside. I'll just touch my son's light. Sigh, let me see if it's the Lu Shijin I've always wanted. He smiled faintly. This is a gift to Tan Meng. What fun are you joining in? It's a limited edition. I specially got it here. Also hot. Baira Weijing took a glance. Yan Yi took a red envelope and poked Lu Jinjin's chest. I think you are also fast. The future children of your level can hang the whole kindergarten. When the two Omega hands are held together, they look at each other. Yan Yi has one hand in his pocket and slightly bends down. The windmill jasmine in the garden is just beautiful. I am worried that you and the baby will be allergic. I didn't pick it. You are more beautiful than I imagined. Butterfly Omega's cheeks turned red from the light gray eyes. She hid behind Baira Weijing and slightly exposed half of her face. She carefully peeked at Yan Yi. Humph. Thank you. The child in Baira Weijing's arms has been staring at Yan Yi's little ears obediently. Lu Jinfang gently touched the child's face. So soft for you to hold. My eldest son is really cute. Quickly praise him. Baira Weijing put the child in Lu Jinfang's arm. Lu Jinfang will not hold the fear of crushing this fragile little meatball with too much force. Yan Yi is worried that Lu Shangjian will throw someone else's child to the side and carefully hold you so that you don't hurt him. One of his small socks fell to the ground. Yan Yi bent over to pick it up and put it back on his small foot. Chubby little feet are like a light red steamed bun stepping on the back of the hand. Soft and soft. The heart has already turned into a pool of water. A very ordinary picture is fixed in the eyes of Lu Jinyan. I can't say what I expect. Yan Yi seemed to have unintentionally asked him if he liked children. Lu Jingxi was slightly silent and his eyes were deep. Now is not the time to think about it. Yan Yi roughly understood Lu Shangjian's meaning and lowered his head silently to put on socks for the child. Suddenly, a tight waist saw Lu Shangjian embrace his body and whispered in his ear, I like you. Are you a child? Yan Yi raised his small ears and pushed away Lu Jinxi's face. His heart felt a lot better. Butterfly Omega picked up the child from Lu Jinjin's arms and gently touched Yan Yi's hand and raised his cheek to see him. They wanted to drink. I took you to eat something. Yan Yi replied softly. The haze in the heart gradually dispersed, and the little rabbit learned from the dream that Lu Jinjin did not mark himself. The whole winery covers an area of 800 acres, and the periphery is a small manor of mountain and water resorts. Every kind of green plant is carefully planted. It is known that these flowers are all Butterfly Omega. The whole long table is covered with desserts and various dishes for guests to pick up. My name is Tan Meng. Zhuang Zhou Mengdi's dream Mega holds the child and sits at the long table. He takes a piece of cherry sauce mousse for Yan Yi. I made it. Try it. Does it suit your taste? Yan Yi tasted this proud and cute little Omega. His cooking skills are really good. He praised Yun Yang for his excellent gardening. He is also proficient in baking. He usually raises flowers and bakes a plate of snacks. He has an alpha. I really feel sorry for myself. What a perfect and comfortable life Yan Yi has longed for a long time. He could sense that the butterfly gland's energy wasn't at M2, but it was stronger than 1, although it wasn't comparable to the A3 gland, but it wasn't weak, and he was still young, and he was talking about dreams, patting the baby's back, shaking his body slightly, and putting the baby to sleep, so he gave it to the nanny beside him while the baby was asleep. Then he crossed his legs and leaned back against the long table, facing Yan Yi. He raised his delicate chin slightly. Before that, Lu Shangjin called me and took a card from me. It should be for you, right? Yan Yi remembered that the password of the bank card before was ordinary. There was a butterfly-shaped sticker on it. He asked me to help him talk about dreams and playfully made a hand gesture to wash clothes. He could spend the money without worry. Lu Lin would not track you. Yan Yi looked at him confusedly when he saw Yan Yi's expression. Talking about dreams looked at him strangely. He didn't tell you. Oh, it doesn't matter. Everyone in the circle knows what kind of person Lu Lin is. Your glands are so rare, he must have his eyes on you. Alpha in the Yoji family has the ability to locate and track. If you have Lu Jinjin's pheromone or spend his money, it's easy to find the pheromone. Yan Yi's expression gradually recedes. He stared blankly at the mousse cake with cherry sauce flowing out of the plate for a long time before he said, "Do you want to protect me?" Because 3 years ago, Lu Jinjin blew up Lu Lin's genetic database. When talking about dreams, he said it like he was watching a joke. The whole computer destroyed your pheromone record. Therefore, Lu Lin can only catch you now by relying on Lu Shangjin's pheromones. As long as he doesn't mark you, you won't be able to find them. It's as if the thick fog that blocks you gradually dissipates from his heart. Yan Yi's entire person is confused. Why didn't I know about this? He stared blankly into the wine tasting room, a glass in his hand, awake, examining the color of the red wine, a champagne candle in a ceramic candlestick, the flame flickering on the side of the brocade, the shadow on his face deep. In the wine tasting room, Xia Pingxian was also in his hand. The smell of red wine was in his hand. He listened excitedly to Baira Weijing talk about his son. In fact, when I sent my son to test his differentiation potential, I wanted to have a good idea in my heart. I didn't expect that the stinky boy was really good. Baira Weijing was quite proud. He completely lost his usual solemn and steady elite appearance. Xia Pingxian sprayed and laughed. He thought that the playboy of our army in those years changed his evil ways and went straight. Baira Weijing hissed and went. No one can beat a child when that little demon acts like a demon. I feel like I have 2 sons now. Xia Pingxian rolled up his sleeves and suggested that you teach him a lesson. Alas, the corner tube went up and gave him a big slap. Keep it safe. Bai Rui laughed angrily. Go to your grandfather's place and change it to your little mirror. It angered you. Do you have to slap him? Xia Pingxian shook his head. If I touch him, he can blow up my house directly. Right, our little mirror has a bad temper. I pretended to call you before. I apologize for him. Don't lower myself to his level. Xia Pingxian Zhao Lu Jinha folded his hands and smiled helplessly. I can't control this child either. Sigh, go back and let my father beat him up. Xia Pingxian even said this. Lu Shangjin can't say anything else. He didn't intend to do anything to a kid who didn't graduate from college. Besides, he's still a friend's most precious brother. It's only because the little rabbit at home is too charming. Look closely. At this moment, the phone rang. Xia Pingxian pointed to his mobile phone. I took a call. What was it from the hospital? The smile on Xia Pingxian's face froze and frowned. Stand up. What's the use of asking me? Go and think of a way. Lu Shijin and Baira Weijing looked at Xia Pingxian at the same time. Xia Pingxian panicked. Your father left the child with multiple organ failure. He was trying to save her. He talked about dreams and poured a cup of black tea for Yan Yi. Baira Weijing suddenly stood by the door. His face was not good. There was an emergency. Let's go to the hospital. Tan Meng frowned and asked, what's the matter? Baira Weijing glanced at Yan Yi and held back his words. Through the door, Yan Yi saw Lu Shangjin hurriedly take his coat and go downstairs, anxiously telling Baira Weijing to leave quickly. Watching the 3 of them hurrying off. Talk about dream also sit still ask Nanny to take a coat Yan Yi indifferent Bo to eat cake your alpha seems to be very anxious talk about dream fingers spin car keys diffuse you wanna go with me I don't go. Yan Yi shook his head. He habitually didn't go to explore what Lu Shangjin didn't want him to know, leaving some leeway and face for each other. Now that their relationship has eased quite a bit, Lu Shangjin seems to have really begun to change his character. Yan Yi doesn't want any complications to arise. He doesn't want to see anything that he shouldn't see. He doesn't want to destroy the trust that has just been restored between the 2 of them. Humph. I have to go and have a look. Don't be too accustomed to Lu Shangjin. As he talked about dreams, he went straight to the garage. Yan Yi had no choice but to follow him to Beijing. It was really worrying to let this male pepper go out by himself. When Tan Meng drove, he knew at a glance that it was Baira Weijing's technique. They followed him all the way to Anfei Hospital. Yan Yi walked into the hospital and saw Lu Jinjin outside the intensive care unit. The time of death was 11:33 a.m. Sorry. We tried our best. Lu Shangjin sat on the chair. Even though he was still dressed neatly, Yan Yi could still read a trace of decadence and a lost baby from his absent-minded eyes. Yan Yi's heart suddenly tightened and his eyes darkened. Could it be Lu Shangjin's child? He didn't want to come any closer, but he was grabbed by the wrist and taken to the ICU. Yan Yi held the glass and looked at the little baby sleeping peacefully inside. It was a Tour Alpha baby. The wrinkled little face was thin and pitiful. It must be very handsome and cute. Unfortunately, the sky broke before it was full term. Even if this is a child made by Lu Jinjin and other Omega, Yan Yi still cannot gloat in sorrow. Through the fingertips, Lu Jinjin's voice is low and hoarse. It is Yi Wan's child. My brother Yan Yi's fingertips tremble. His eyes are wide open. He looks down at his late uncle. Isn't it 10 years ago? Lu Shijin rubbed his face. I went to the bathroom. He stood up shakily. His footsteps were hidden from Shan. After driving for a whole day without rest, he was suddenly injured by the sunny day. Lu Jinmin was very tired, lying on the toilet pool, vomiting until he finally saw the blood. The water in the sink was turned to the maximum. The sound of water flowing could not cover Yuming in his mind. A fresh and soft little body was stiff and faded in front of him. Lu Jinmin could only take away the last trace of nostalgia in the world through the glass. He left nothing for him. Lu Jingxiang was like a drunk who had fallen asleep. Most of his weight was on Yan Yi's body. He hugged Omeg tightly in his arms and said hoarsely, I will never see him again. He completely walked away with my gun. Bang! He held Yan Yi's cheek and leaned over to him. Yan Yi clearly saw that his eyes were covered with dense blood vessels. His eyes were trembling in fear. He put Yan Yilu into his arms and said, Why do I bleed the same blood as Lu Lin? Why does Lu Shangjin grit his teeth and put his head on Yan Yi's neck? His whole body is shaking. I know. Let's go home first. Yan Yi gently patted Lu Shangjin's back and tried to release pheromones to appease his injured Alf. Oh no, my Anzi's pregnancy test report was discovered by Lu Shijin. In the last episode, Lu Shangjin watched his favorite father take away the last trace of the world. He clenched his teeth and put his head in Yan Yi's neck. The whole person was trembling. Yan Yi gently patted Lu Shangjin's back and tried to release pheromones to appease his injured alpha. April is coming to an end. Green plants on both sides of the road sprout and sprout. A gentle breeze flows into the nasal cavity. Lu Jin falls asleep in the car. Yan Yi carries Lu Jin to the bedroom. He is nearly 1.9 meters strong. Alpha is not light. When Lu Jin is placed on the bed, Yan Yi is almost brought down by him. He hesitates for a while or sits on the carpet with his back against the bed. In the past, no matter how busy the company's affairs were, Lu Jinjin would never show such a defenseless and tired expression. Only on the day of the breakup 3 years ago, there was a loss of control and anger. It's all in the past. Yan Yi reached out a hand and Lu Jinhang's left hand, 10 fingers, gently rubbed the wedding ring at the root of his finger. Since the breakup, he was rarely allowed to enter Lu Jinjin's bedroom. After a break, he formed a habit of not staying in Lu Jinjin's bedroom as much as possible, let alone going to his bed. Yan Yi silently sat on the carpet with his legs in his arms. The pheromone of narcissus scent permeated the bedroom. The security feeling wrapped by alpha pheromone was never tired. Even so, he was very satisfied. He did not want to ask too much. Lu Jin's breath suddenly approached his neck. Don't sit there. He's still not awake. He's lying on the edge of the bed. He's sleepy. He's reaching out to hold the rabbit in his arms. You wake up. Drink some water. Yan Yi's scared. He wants to reach out for a glass of water. No. Lu Shangjin scooped Yan Yi back up and lifted a leg to press Yan Yi's body sideways to wrap the rabbit into a small free ball and hold it. The tip of his nose and lips were pressed against the soft rabbit's ears. Lu Jinjin hugged his fingertips and trembled slightly. Oh, the soft pheromone smell of Yan Yi's neck. Yan Yi quietly accompanied him to release more pheromones for him. He raised his head and reached out with his fingertips to trace the bridge of Lu Jin's nose. Then he relaxed his tightly knitted brows. His alpha needed him. Yan Yi tried his best to reach out to turn off the light. He was helpless. His body was like being tied up by a huge octopus. He couldn't reach the switch. His breath with a light pheromone smell swept Yan Yi's neck. Yan Yi struggled to turn over from Lu Jinjin's arms. Ling went up and kissed him gently on the corner of his lips and then raised his little ears to sleep on Lu Jinyan's eyes. Good night. Lu Shijin was exhausted and slept from the afternoon until the next evening. When he woke up, his arms and bed were empty. When the fog came from the first floor, there was a crisp sound of a bowl exploding. Lu Jinjin was suddenly awakened by the shock. He put on his slippers and hurried downstairs. The smell of fried steak wafted in the restaurant. Yan Yi squatted in front of the table and picked up the broken porcelain pieces on the ground. His fingers suddenly cramped. When you lose your grip on the plate, you fall to the ground. Don't go from the second floor to the first floor. Yan Yi picked up his head and glanced at Lu Shangjin. His fingertips accidentally rubbed against sharp porcelain pieces. With a hissing sound, Little Rabbit looked down and realized that the wound was actually 1 centimeter long. Lu Shangjin walked over and dragged Yan Yi out of the pile of broken porcelain pieces. He picked up Yan Yi's finger and squeezed the blood first. "Wait here. Don't move. I'll go find alcohol and band-aids." As he spoke, he hurriedly turned around and left the original alcohol and band-aid in the medicine box in the bathroom. However, when he was in heat last time, he was tossed over by Lu Jin. Now he can only go to the storage room to find a new Yan Yi. He thanked him and stood there waiting obediently. He was flattered that Brother Jin was more considerate than yesterday. Lu Shangjin took longer to find alcohol than he imagined. Yan Yi patiently waited for Little Rabbit Ear to jump board. He thought, "Brother Jin, where did you find alcohol? If you don't come back, your wound will heal soon." When Lu Shangjin came back, his expression was a little strange. He put alcohol and band-aids in front of Yan Yi and stared at him. Yan Yi's expression began to feel uncomfortable. "What are you looking at me for?" Lu Jinsong's palm held a small folded inspection report. Yan Yi's face instantly turned white. In the previous episode, Lu Shijin accidentally found the pregnancy test report when he went to find alcohol for the little rabbit. He was shocked and wanted to get the test report back. "Why did you touch my things again? Did you read the contents?" Lu Jinji held the inspection report between his fingers, and his heart was long. He reached out to Yan Yi where he couldn't get it. "When did it happen?" Little Rabbit Ears gently brushed to cover up their own uneasiness. Yan Yi lowered his eyes and replied softly, "The last time we were in the restaurant. You didn't wear it, and I didn't take any medicine." Lu Shijin rubbed the root of his brow in frustration. Suddenly, he clenched his hand and slammed the inspection report on the table. Yan Yi was so scared that he backed away from Lu Shangjin and hugged his little belly and retreated to the corner. "Don't you like it?" Lu Shangjin approached him and held out his hand to him. Yan Yi was like a frightened rabbit. "Close your eyes, squat down, shrink yourself into a small ball, shivering, shouting, 'I'll raise it myself, I'll raise it myself. Don't bother. Let me keep this baby, please, I won't bother you with anyone else. Please don't kill it. I want it. I want a baby.'" Lu Jingqiuo stared blankly at him. Had he been doing too much for him all this time? Yan Yi even dared to secretly check himself when he was pregnant, but he dared not say anything to his alpha. Lu Shangjin squatted down to hold the trembling rabbit in his arms and gently stroked his back. At this time, he realized that Yan Yi had been walking on thin ice around him. For this poor little rabbit, he was not the most reliable alpha he could rely on, but a demon who would steal his child at any time. Lu Jink raised his finger and gently rubbed Yan Yi's wet eyelashes. In his ear whisper comfort, "Don't be afraid, I didn't say don't like." Yan Yi picked up eyes light gray pupil floating a layer of flashing tear film. "If only gave birth to a rabbit zero. I love him too." Lu Shangjin lowered his head and kissed Yan Yi between his eyebrows, like a gentle promise he made when he was 17. Yan Yi stayed on Lu Shangjin's neck for a while. He could not help tears flowing down his cheeks to Lu Shangjin's neck. "Brother Jin, should I wait until you come back and bow your head and respond to the expectations of the little girl with a long kiss?" At night, in the bedroom, the two pheromones mix into sweet catalysts. The heart is entangled, the heart is entangled, and the heart is immersed. Lu Jin is very patient and uses enough comfort pheromones and skills to give Yan Yi the most comfortable experience to make up for the lack of compatibility. Yan Yilu held his neck and whispered in his ear, "Brother Jin, I love you. Even if I have been hurt, the hidden part of my heart still beats with a warm worry." At 3 a.m., everything was calm again. Lu Shijin put Yan Yi to sleep. Only then did he quietly get up and gently bring the door of the bedroom. The small tea table on the balcony still maintained the tragic situation that had been dumped before. The land brocade did not reason to step on it. He sat on the ground with his back against the railing and lit a cigarette. He looked into the night and thought that perhaps this child was a gift from God, and that it gave him hope when he lost everything. Stomping out his only hope that night, Lu Shangjin smoked all night on the balcony. 3 days later, Lu Shangjin drove Yan Yi to Anfei Hospital for a comprehensive checkup. It took several hours to complete the checkup. Lu Shangjin asked the driver to send Yan Yixian back to rest while he stayed in the hospital and waited for the results. When he got the inspection report, Lu Jingxian actually had an inexplicable excitement in his heart. A little guy with the same blood as himself was quietly pregnant with something mysterious and sacred. As he read the report one by one, his face turned from white to green, as if a column of bright begonias had been cut off by a sickle. "Brother Jin, save our baby. I'll be good and obedient in the future. It's not dinner time yet." Yan Yi lowers his head to take care of the roses in the flower jar. Every day, the withered petals fall on the table and are collected by Yan Yi one by one. The loose rose is out of shape than when it was first acquired, but even if it is beyond recognition, it is still cherished, because happiness is hard to come by when fantasy comes true. Lu Zijin's assistant was very efficient, and soon brought back the sundries he left in the dilapidated bar. Yan Yi looked for them for a long time after receiving them, and repeatedly confirmed that the notebook was indeed not inside. The assistant has been saying that everything in the bedroom has been brought back. If there is something that I forgot to bring him back, I will look for it. Yan Yi is not used to bothering others. Therefore, he only said that he found the Jin brother in his heart. Now that the notebook is back, it is no longer important. In the past 2 days, Yan Yi had already given Lu Xiangjun a score that was off the charts. When the baby was born, this love would have crystallized, and there might not be any chance to lose points. Yan Yi sat back on the sofa and glanced at the quartz clock on the wall. I don't know if Lu Shijin is still waiting for the test results. I want to make a phone call to ask about the results, but I can't get through, so I had to send him a message. Dear, will you come back for dinner tonight? The message was like a stone in the sea. Yan Yi looked at the screen and his heart was empty. Dear, this name only seems sweet when he can get a response. It was almost 5:30 p.m. and Lu Jin hadn't come back yet. Yan Yi thought about it and decided to prepare dinner first while waiting. Yan Yi put on his apron and tidied up the bow at the back to expose his tail for air. He stirred the milky white fish soup in the pot while telling the baby in his stomach that he would eat more rabbits after drinking fish soup today. It would be cute if they were round and soft. He held his stomach and gently touched the baby in his stomach when Lu Jinjin was not there, and the baby in his stomach became a little angel who accompanied him to kill loneliness. He thought that if it was a tour set baby, it would also be very good. He hoped that his temper would be gentle. Yan Yi counted the days every day and looked forward to the arrival of this wonderful little angel. At this moment, there were footsteps outside the door. Yan Yi's ears suddenly stood up. He hurriedly turned off the fire. Then he took off his apron and walked quickly to the door, preparing to welcome his alpha home. The door opened respectfully, but suddenly 5 or 6 doctors in white coats came in. Yan Yi took 2 steps back and looked at them warily. What are you doing? A doctor standing at the front has a circle of brand BB000576 printed on his neck. Other doctors also have PBB serial numbers everywhere. Most of them are J1 level ALF. We will deal with false pregnancy for you. False pregnancy is very harmful to the body. We must deal with it as soon as possible. Yan Yi covered his stomach and did not react for a while. What did you say? The doctor at the front put down the medicine box and gestured to the auxiliary doctors he brought with him to inject the anesthetic first. The 4 doctors rushed forward and grabbed Yan Yi's arm. He pinned him to the couch while another doctor took out a tube of anesthetic and sterile cotton balls. Let go of me. Yan Yi just recovered from his shock and struggled and screamed. I'm not pregnant. I checked. I have a bunny. Where did you come from? A tube of anesthetic spread through the veins of Yan Yi's limbs in an instant. The extent of Yan Yi's struggle became smaller and smaller. Because of the excessive shock, his cheeks lost their color. He struggled to touch the mobile phone on the sofa and dialed Lu Jinxi's number. The moment the phone was connected, Yan Yi desperately broke free from the doctor's hand and exhausted all his strength to face the receiver in despair. Brother Jin, save me. I'm afraid. However, the phone was hung up. Yan Yi struggled to pick up his head and saw Lu Xiangjun standing in front of him with a cold face. The air around him was shrouded in a thick and violent pheromone. He opened his eyes wide in fear and looked at Lu Xiangjun, who was full of anger. He didn't understand why Brother Jin was angry. He only saw him weakly extending his hands to Lu Xiangjun, hoping that his alpha would pull him out of hell. Brother Jin, save me. I will be very obedient in the future. Lu Xiangjun's condescending gaze paused for a moment and hesitated for a moment. At this moment, Yan Yi is trembling like when he was a child, kneeling in the blood of the laboratory. Dropping his gun, he crawled over to him and opened his hand to ask Lu Jinjin to carry him away in fear. Brother Jin, save me. They wanted to kill our child. Yan Yi's fingertips were tightly grasped on the sofa. The faint blood stains were printed in the finger marks. The hesitation in Lu Xiangjun's eyes was instantly ignited by anger. I saw that he grabbed Yan Yi's slender neck and slammed the weak rabbit against the wall. Then he squinted and looked at him. You lied to me. The beloved alpha stood in front of Yan Yi, but he always trembled when he was touched. After Wang Yijia, he could not believe it and could not resist. He had to protect his fragile abdomen. Several doctors came to grab him. Lu Jinjiao waved his hand. I came by myself. As he spoke, he reached out to hold Yan Yi's lower abdomen and squeezed it hard. The bunny that belonged to him before was ruined and dirtied by others. He had to clean it himself. Pain. Let go of me. Yan Yi screams in terror. Instinct makes him unable to obey. He struggles frantically to grab Lu Xiangjun's wrist and tries to break free. Brother Jin, you promised me you would love the baby. I'll take care of it. I'll keep it a secret. Please, Brother Jin. Lu Jingjun's hand is slightly trembling. No child lies so much that even he believes it, right? What did you and Xia Jingshan do when they were preparing for the gland replacement operation in the hospital? Yan Yi's vision was blurred by tears, so painful that he couldn't even say a complete sentence. I don't know. I don't know. I didn't lie to you. Lu Shangjin clenched his teeth and pinched Yan Yi's chin, forcing him to look up at a video on his mobile phone. It's a surveillance video. Xia Jingshan entered Yan Yi's ICU and stayed there until morning. Did what? Lu Shangjin fiercely accompanied Yan Yi with a sharp scream of anesthesia that made him unable to resist. In fact, Lu Shangjin hated not false pregnancy, but the time of the false pregnancy was on the days of his business trip. From the inspection report to now, Lu Jinjin has done a lot of things. First, he went to inquire about the harm of false pregnancy to the baby until it was not fatal. Then, he followed the usual clues and linked it to Xia Jingshan. He went to investigate the small hotel where Yan Yi stayed. There was no surveillance camera in the store, but there was surveillance outside. Yan Yi went downstairs to pick up Xia Jingshan. Xia Jingshan put his coat on him and gave him a bouquet of roses. Lu Shijin personally went to that small hotel. Business was not good at the hotel. After Yan Yi left, the room he stayed in had not yet been occupied. As long as he approached this narrow room, he would be able to smell the residual smell of M2-alpha pheromone. The air in the bathroom was not circulated. It was filled with a strong smell of estrus pheromone. It was the smell of gypsophila. This child that he had never cared about actually stole his wife under his nose. Because he thought he knew Yan Yi too well, he never thought Yan Yi would lie to him and tell him such a big lie to humiliate him. Only today did he realize that everything he used to support his spirit was an illusion. The dead left him. The living betrayed him. Lu Jingshan's heart was suddenly torn apart by sharp claws. Alpha's dignity was challenged and insulted like never before. Lu Jinjin tightly grabbed Yan Yi's neck and pretended to be pregnant. Isn't it particularly interesting to fake the test report of real pregnancy to deceive me? I should have known that rabbits are always in heat. Such things can't be done without people all day. Isn't it interesting for Lu Shijin to slap him and treat me like a fool? You say, how long have you been with Xia Jingshan? He cares so much about whether you have already served you well. Is it comfortable to be with the younger one? Lu Jinjin tightly strangled his stomach and exerted pressure to grind the rabbit to death. Yan Yi? Yan Yi's voice is getting weaker and weaker. The pain and fear make him unable to think at all. He only knows that his favorite alpha is desperately pressing his stomach to kill his child. I really didn't lie to you. Check it. Say it's true. I really have. There are rabbits. A moment ago Yan Yi was still weakly hoping that Lu Shangjin would come to save him. His hands had clearly preferred to be seriously injured, but they would also hold him tightly and take him away from the abyss. He had been deceived by Lu Shangjin. These days, Lu Shangjin deliberately used tender feelings to fake consideration to deceive him for 3 years. It seemed like a daydream. He had considered countless possibilities for the future of the two people regardless of past grievances, but he had never thought that Lu Shangjin, who seemed to have changed his nature, would still be more cruel than at the beginning. Yan Yi's eyes lost their luster. The blood gradually soaked through his pajamas and dripped onto the floor. Lu Jin threw down a medical examination sheet and told several doctors to clean up the rest. I will come to see him in a few days. He lowered his eyes and stared at Yan Yi, who was convulsing in pain on the ground. He always felt that something was wrong. Although the evidence was conclusive, Yan Yi's grievance did not seem fake. If he did he really think that he could get away with it by refusing to admit it? A few doctors stood 5 steps away like cicadas. The cold room and the voice of Lu Jinjin was shocked. Don't run to Yan Yi to stop bleeding. False pregnancy really needs to be dealt with in time, otherwise it will cause great damage to the body. However, the young master's approach is too simple and rude. Although it is not harmful to the body, it is not a small blow to the spirit. Yan Yi bit his pale lips and trembled. He grabbed the medical examination sheet. Looking at the results of the test above, he was stunned silently to confirm that the false pregnancy was obviously true. He just wanted a little rabbit to accompany him. He missed Lu Jin. Every night, he could be less lonely. Didn't he just not want children? Probably after the test, he found that it was really a rabbit. 0 baby. He didn't want it. He wanted alpha heirs. Yan Yi curled his lips and smiled. Blood trickled down his lips to his cheeks. It was good. Then he would never give birth to children for Lu Jinli again. Give him 1,000,000 points. And now, without the Alf that dotes on him and the bunny, Yan Yi closes his eyes in despair. After Lu Jinshan slammed the door and left, Jing did not leave, but sat in the car and smoked one cigarette after another. It wasn't until Yu Ming's temples were completely numbed and calmed down by nicotine that Yan Yi's frightened pleading appearance appeared in his mind again. Lu Shangjin pressed his heart and endured the sharp pain in his heart. At this moment, his hands were cold and numb, and his heart was slow. He even hammered the steering wheel heavily without feeling anything. This is probably the most incisive manic rage he has experienced since he lived so long. For the next 2 days, Lu Jindu spent the night in the company and never returned home. Most of the contracts piled up on his desk were signed for a long time. Lu Jinjin was not in the mood to open the contract for a long time. He simply put it on hold. On the other side, Xia Pingshan's face was as black as a block when he came out of the meeting room. He was scolding Lu Shangjin to his assistant behind him. What exactly was he doing? Was he targeting the Hongyi Xia Corporation? Did he not pick up the phone? He dragged on several contracts and was almost overdue, but there was no movement. What was he doing? The child left behind by his father was short-lived and had multiple organ failures. Who could save him? He was the emperor's son. He was saving the crown prince. It was not necessary for the Hongyi Xia Corporation to be buried with him. The more he thought about it, the more he couldn't help but call Lu Shangjin. He thought that if Lu Shangjin didn't pick up, he would immediately ask the driver to drive to Changhui. He saw Xia Pingshan dialing and walking back and forth irritably. The phone rang 10 times before Lu Jinkai picked it up. Xia Pingshan endured the fire and said good things to Lu Jinkai. "Brother, you finally picked up the phone. What have you been doing these days?" Lu Jinkai asked if you helped your brother find Yan Yi. "What's the matter?" "No, Xia Pingshan, wow. He did help Xia Jingshan check, but he probably didn't do anything. You have a good brother." Lu Jin hung up the phone. Xia Pingshan choked in one breath. He turned around and grabbed the collar of his assistant. "He brought me the report that Lu Shijin had taken people to check last time. Xia Jingshan had been hiding in the school dormitory since he came back from the dilapidated bar. He didn't move much." At this time, another roommate was leaning on the bed and holding an old notebook. He was in a daze. He took this notebook out of his bedroom on the second floor of the decaying bar and he's looked through it several times. The little rabbit's handwriting is as delicate as anyone else's. Except for some notes in the corners, most of the notebooks are like diaries, recording happy or unhappy life and land brocade-related things. There are always scores behind them. You can feel lonely when you read the pages. The score has been reduced to negative. Take you home. When filled up the score, Xia Jingshan looked at it again and again, just like accompanying a young rabbit through a decade. At this time, he bent one leg and leaned silently on the pillow. His eyelids were swollen and his eyes were red. Roommates saw him like this and asked with concern, "Jingshan, are you okay?" Xia Jingshan asked an irrelevant question. "Do you like it so much that you look at it from afar?" The roommate opened his mouth slightly and shook his head. At this moment, the security door of the dormitory was opened with a loud bang. Xia Pingshan walked in aggressively and several burly bodyguards took his roommate out and sealed the door. There were only 2 brothers left in the dormitory. Xia Jingshan was shocked by his brother's actions. Xia Pingshan grabbed Xia Jingshan's arm and pulled him down from the bed. He raised his hand and slapped him. "Okay, play other people's daughter-in-law to good, don't learn bad, learn from you, okay? That's how I teach your babies." If you want to see more wonderful content, please click on the quick AP in the lower left corner. Our little lion will not see you. Xia Pingshan slapped an examination report in Xia Jingshan's hand. "You like that little rabbit, right? Look at how miserable you caused him to have a forced abortion." Lu Jinjin personally moved his hand. "What did you say?" Xia Jingshan gritted his teeth and looked down at the examination report. He was diagnosed. The 4 words G made his eyes hurt. He thought that the rabbit was forced to L. How much pain should he have? How scared should he be? Xia Jingshan was surprised and hurriedly flipped through the examination report. Suddenly, he found something wrong. Tell his brother that this is wrong. Before I accompanied him to the hospital, he had an examination and said that he was really pregnant. Xia Pingshan turned around and lit a cigarette. He tried his best to suppress his angry mind. For 10 years, the diagnosis results of Anfeiya Hospital have never been wrong once. There must be something wrong. I have to check Xia Jingshan, he said, turning around directly, but Xia Pingshan grabbed his wrist. "If you dare to walk out of this door today, don't call me brother." Xia Jingshan shook his hand hard. "If you have the ability to kill me, I will see my brother like this." Xia Pingshan's evil fire rushed to his brain and suddenly activated his J1 ability, gravity control, and Xia Jingshan was severely pressed on the floor. Then he took out a hand card from his pocket and inserted it into Xia Jingshan's hands. Just like that, Xia Jingshan was taken home by his brother and grounded for 2 days. The next night, Xia Pingshan was worried. He came in and took a look. He saw his brother lying on his back in bed, flipping through an old notebook. His eyes were gloomy. Xia Pingshan placed the tremella soup he brought in on the table and sat on the edge of the bed in the small mirror. He thought it through. He didn't apologize to Lu Shangjin. Xia Jingshan took the notebook. "I wanted to apologize to Yan Yi too. He didn't deserve him. He was scum. He never cared about Yan Yi." As he said that, he turned his back and faced his brother. "You hit me and handcuffed me. You first apologized to me. Facing the little ancestor, Xia Pingshan could only admit defeat. He took a deep breath and apologized. Okay? Turn around. I'll see if it's broken. The little lion turned around and Xia Pingshan looked down. It seemed that his face was still a little swollen. He turned around and wanted to ask his aunt to boil an egg and apply it. Unexpectedly, Xia Jingshan raised his left hand towards himself. Xia Pingshan turned around. What are you doing? You haven't finished your sentence yet. He felt that the gravity around him immediately changed direction and pulled him away without warning. He crashed into the wall and Xia Jingshan slipped out right under his nose. You come back here. As a result, Xia Jingshan locked the door without saying a word. Since Lu Jinjin lived in the company, the office building seemed to have been pressed the mute button for 4 days. On the 5th day, Lu Jinjin's anger had subsided to numbness. His mind cleared up a little, so he began to repeatedly flip through his mobile phone. There was no message about Yan Yi in his mobile phone. He thought, whether it was a video or a fake pregnancy, it was indeed Yan Yi's fault. Shouldn't Yan Yi give him a refund? In the past, no matter how playboy he was, at least he had never gone to find love before he broke up with Yan Yi. He remembered Yan Yi's expression when he struggled and cried crazily. He kept saying that he didn't know. After he was angry, some unreasonable clues suddenly poured into Lu Jinao. He knew that if he was pregnant, he would definitely take him to the hospital for a comprehensive examination. At that time, why didn't he resist or even obediently follow him for an examination? Because he firmly believed that he was really pregnant? Since it was a fake, why did the hospital have to issue a pregnancy diagnosis? Is it a misdiagnosis? Many details pieced together to make the always sensitive and vigilant Lu Shangjian do not believe that this is just a coincidence. In fact, if he could have been more calm and trusted Yan Yi, he would not have done such a thing. He should have thought that Yan Yi would hardly lie. But if Yan Yi didn't lie to him, does he still think he killed his child on purpose? Lu Shijin stood up with a cold face and forced himself to press it. It was just to punish him and let him reflect on his mistakes. Besides, he had to deal with this situation as soon as possible, otherwise the harm would be even greater. He couldn't stand Yan Yi misunderstanding that he was a murderer. He had to ask clearly. It was only half an hour's drive from the company to home. Lu Shijin ran several red lights along the way. Perhaps he doesn't like to be misunderstood, but apart from this reason, Shang Jin can't explain this fear of losing something important. When he opens the door, he finds that the door is open. There is a string in Lu Jin's heart that is getting tighter and tighter. It immediately straightens and suddenly hurts. There was a pool of dried water marks on the floor of the hall. The ceramic flower jar shattered into several pieces. The rose was lying in the water. The petals were slightly curled. The brocade on the ground was stunned. Yan Yan? He walked quickly into the dining room hoping to see the rabbit still cooking fish soup in the kitchen, but the kitchen was empty, and the pot of fish soup was still in the soup, emitting a rotten sour smell. He searched the huge house, and there was no trace of Yan Yi anywhere. Could it be that he went out? Jin Jung stood in the empty living room and tried to remember where Yan Yi might be. Suddenly, he thought of a place and ran to the storage room. Opened the door of the wardrobe. There is still a dried blood stain on the warm white sheet. Yan Yi is not here, but I can imagine that the little rabbit used to hide here in fear, holding the pillow and hiding in the dark, trembling, waiting for someone to take him away or save him with comfort pheromones. Lu Shijin held the cabinet door for a long time. His heart gradually cooled down due to anger. Then he formed a layer of frost. There was an old book beside the pillow. Recently, he often saw Yan Yi holding it. He picked it up and flipped through, and the petals that had been inside were sucked out of the pages, and it became a thin, half-wet specimen, and in the margins there were occasional moods, and I thought I didn't like roses. But when I received a bunch, my nose was still sore because he gave me the baby for a month and a half. He was very obedient every day. He didn't kick Rui Rui like other babies. He made my father tired and uncomfortable. Turn another page. It was some names that started with Lu. The rabbit wrote more than a dozen names that sounded good and circled them. Lu Jinjin saw him circle Lu Yuan and painted Lu Yan out. He felt that his name should not appear on the baby. It turned out that Yan Yi really thought that he was pregnant and firmly believed that he was looking forward to the birth of the child every day. Lu Shijin's legs gave way and he bumped into the door, his face turning stiff and pale. At this moment, Lu Shijin suddenly noticed that the narrow room was vaguely filled with the smell of poppy pheromones. The door handle was stained with a sticky spider web. Xiao Wenying. In the eyes of others, the deep feelings of the little rabbit are cheap, his single-minded, no one understands, will only be ignored and laughed at, his feelings will not be understood by anyone. When Yan Yi opens his eyes again, his whole body is wrapped in a strange pheromone smell. He struggled to get up, but his whole body felt as heavy as if he was pinned to a pillar. He touched his back and found that there was a light metal syringe nailed to his spine. The cold liquid was pouring into his body through the gap in his spine. Most of his body was cold and numb. It hurt. There was no light around him. He reached out his hand to touch where he was. Just 10 centimeters out, he touched a barbed wire fence. At this moment, just stretching out an arm had exhausted all his strength. Yan Yi gasped weakly and lost the spirit to continue exploring. At this moment, someone pushed the door and walked in. The extremely aggressive poppy smell was like a poisonous snake spitting its tongue. Yan Yi couldn't open his eyes for a while under the glaring light. He narrowed his eyes and saw clearly his current situation. He was locked in a narrow cage made of barbed wire. The person who came was Xiao Wenying. Xiao Wenying squatted down beside him and touched his cheek gently with his finger. He licked his lower lip and said, "You finally woke up. I saved you from hell. Don't you appreciate me?" Yan Yi raised his eyes and looked at him blankly. His pale eyes seemed to be covered with a layer of dust. Xiao Wenying sat down in front of him. 3 years ago, he investigated that the Lan Jin house hid the delicate rabbit. Ome actually has rare A3 glands. And since then he's been trying to figure out how to get this little rabbit back. However, Lu Jinjin is an extremely crazy person who robbed his things. I don't know what amazing revenge he will come up with. Therefore, he has to keep annoying Lu Jinduo. As long as the little rabbit believes that he is pregnant and miscarries because of Lu Jinjin, they will be willing to share their ways. Xiao Wenying feels that what he has done is to help two people who torture each other as soon as possible. If it is really a pair of people who are stronger than Jin, and how can it be easily separated? Yan Yi did not move. Little rabbit ears were sick and pulling his eyes. His eyes were covered with loneliness and despair. He had no feelings. He was like a zombie. "Come on, let's go out for a while," Xiao Wenying said, opening the cage and holding Yan Yi out so that his soft body could be gently placed in his arms. Yan Yi gently pushed him and muttered absent-mindedly, "Don't go." Xiao Wenying smiled kindly at him. "It's better for you to walk outside. The maple trees in the courtyard are growing luxuriantly by the hot spring pool." Xiao Wenying holds his hand and holds him to sit on the bench beside the hot spring. In a few months, this maple tree will turn red and fall on the white steaming water surface. It is especially beautiful. Xiao Wenying slowly approached his prey to be slaughtered like a spider sizing up flying insects in its web. His eyes swept several times on the glands behind Yan Yi's neck. The little lop-eared rabbit now was too fragile to withstand his sharp teeth and bite Yan Yi's collar. The serial number of PBB00002, which shows the blue brand on the thin white chest, is a powerful proof that Xiao Wenying can't wait to mark him. Remove all the smell of Lu Jinjin from his body. A3 Omega is almost flawless. The most fatal weakness is that he will instinctively be infatuated with the alpha marked by himself. He drives him to love him like crazy and becomes a ruthless blade in his hand. Therefore, the little rabbit will unswervingly miss Lu Jinjin's favor. "Sleepy?" Xiao Wenying held Yan Yi's head and let him lean on his shoulder. He wanted to sleep for a while. Yan Yi leaned against him stiffly and did not move. He was like a statue. Lu Jin was recognized as cold and heartless. If you stick to him and don't go, it's a cheap move. He couldn't be touched. Xiao Wenying leaned against the back of the chair and stretched his long legs with his hands on the beam. He curled up lazily. Yan Yi stiffly picked up his eyes and his face had some reaction. No one could see through his eyes the little prince in the castle and could not hear the zither that sounded like salvation from the abyss. They can't feel their own division by the land brocade bleeding. The warmth of the warm wind blowing on the body is that he saved himself from the knife mountain and the sea of fire. So in the eyes of others, his deep feelings are all cheap, his single-minded, no one understands, only will be ignored and laughed at, which makes him more painful. His feelings are not understood by anyone. Yan Yi touched the belly that became flat again. Now, even he himself doesn't understand that Lu Shijin personally killed their children. No matter how much kindness and touching he was, he had already exhausted all the children since he decided to kill the little life he had conceived in his belly. If you want to see more wonderful content, please click on the lower left corner to quickly read AP. The rabbit doesn't want glands to dig them out. The hot spring water surface is steaming white air. The breeze shakes the green maple trees, occasionally blowing down a piece floating on the water surface. Yan Yi is sitting on the rabbit ear, does not move. "Cold. Do you want to go back?" Xiao Wenying put his arm around his shoulder. Every time he touched Yan Yi, he would quietly activate his M2 differentiation ability, nerve paralysis. Trace amounts of poison would enter Yan Yi's brain through his glands, corroding his memory and thinking. The little rabbit in a trance would be easily fooled by the paralyzing poison. Yan Yi picked up his head and looked at the maple tree beside the hot spring. He replied indifferently that he had already lost 13 leaves. Spiders are used to lying on the ground and have enough patience to wait. Just staying with a high-fit mega can make him feel comfortable. Therefore, Xiao Wenying did not refuse the 10th leaf. He accompanied Yan Yi until the evening. Until Yan Yi fell asleep leaning on him, Xiao Wenying picked him up and walked to the maple tree. He rarely broke his promise. "So he tore off 2 leaves and threw them into the water. So we can go back." He brought Yan Yi back to the windowless bedroom. Yan Yi's eyes were half open. The focus he had lost was focused again. He trembled and grabbed Xiao Wenying's shoulder. "Do you want my glands?" Xiao Wenying carried him slowly forward. "Of course, which alpha didn't want you?" As he spoke, he opened the cage door and put Yan Yi back in the cage for you. "I don't want Yan Yi anymore." He pulled hard on the glands on the back of his neck and scratched his nails on his fragile skin. "No, Xiao Wenying, grab his hand. Only the most failed gland hunter will cut off the gland of high-level Omega to sell. The experienced hunter will directly plunder with Omega and completely own him from body to heart." Xiao Wenying gently put Yan Yi's hand at the bottom of the cage so that he can't touch his own glands and the drug injector installed on his spine. When he learns, he can stop sleeping in the cage. Understand? Yan Yi loosened his fingers and tried to pull his hand out. The lock on his fingers was an electric lock. Only when he struggled desperately would he release a small electric current to stimulate his skin. The pain forced Yan Yi's body to stiffen and show a painful expression, so he curled up and stopped moving. The servant prepared dinner. Xiao Wenying sat at the table while cutting steak. Now the little rabbit's spirit was severely damaged and could only rely on glandular energy to maintain nutrition. When he felt better, he could feed him something soft. The servant walked to Xiao Wenying and shot himself to the phone. Xiao Wenying's face suddenly showed a relaxed smile and picked up the phone to listen to his voice. "Brother, it's Friday. I'm out of school. Why don't you pick me up?" Spider's voice is very low. She sounds very disappointed. Xiao Wenying relaxes in his chair. "I've been too busy these days. I'll be home next week." Xiao Wenqi's voice dragged on into a crying voice. "Brother said he would send me to school last time, but I waited for you for a long time and didn't come. I went to school by myself." Xiao Wenying's face immediately darkened. "I asked the driver to pick you up. Didn't he go?" Spider sniffed his nose and came, "But I didn't sit in the smelly chicken house. You promised my teacher that you wouldn't keep your word." Xiao Wenying's eyes were filled with love. "I was wrong. I had an emergency at that time. I couldn't leave next time. Okay? I will definitely go back next week to kiss my brother." The little spider got the promise he wanted, and gave the brother on the other end of the phone a wooden one. After hanging up the phone, Xiao Wenying's face instantly became dark and unclear. "Tell the servant to tell the housekeeper to get a new driver for Wenqi." Xiao Wenying hasn't seen Yan Yi all day. When he turned on the light, he saw Yan Yi hunched over his body, his furball tail raised up, and his body ached slightly. Xiao Wenying opened his hand and picked up the rabbit. He said, squatting down and gently pulling his toes until he returned to his original state. Yan Yi finally calmed down. Xiao Wenying looked down at him. "Why hang on a tree? I am much more loyal than Lu Jinjin. Besides, our compatibility is 87. I just went to test it, and I never play Omega. Is it not good to be with me?" Xiao Wenying put the little rabbit on the bed and continued, "He doesn't mark you or let you kill for him. You are a natural killer. Why are you willing to be wronged in the kitchen? You have to do what you should do. The way you hold a gun is attractive." Yan Yi huddled under the blanket and silently looked at Xiao Wenying with innocent eyes. "Why did he keep looking at me like this?" Xiao Wenying looked at me for a moment. He stopped his eyes, sat on the bed, lowered his head and asked if he didn't want to sleep in the cage. Yan Yi nodded and said, "Yes." Shaking, grabbing Xiao Wenying's sleeve, "I need to appease pheromone." Xiao Wenying's satisfied lips. "This is like you," and then release the pacifying pheromones as he wishes. Yan Yi stopped talking, but closed his eyes and stretched his back. Xiao Wenying patted Yan Yi's leg gently. "Use a trace of harmless anesthetic poison to give him a good sleep. After you have a good rest, I will take you to a good place. This manor is like another world, isolated from noise, isolated from the surrounding woods and meadows. It's an uninhabited island, and deep in it lies a vast training ground that's connected to the outside world, and some of the family killers use it as a club to practice gun and fist games." When they came in, there were quite a few people inside, most of them of different levels. Alf, standing in front of different projects, having fun, sweating, strong and pungent pheromone smells, which made Yan Yi's little rabbit ears shrink in fear. At this time, someone noticed that they were stunned at first, and then they laughed forward and backward. There was even Omega, who dared to come in and look. His ears were so scared that they shrank in fear. "Ha ha, so cute." Xiao Wenying gently put his arm around Yan Yi's shoulder and released a comforting pheromone to comfort him as if no one else was around. "Don't be afraid." Yan Yi was forced to accept the gentle well of the prisoner. Xiao Wenying's comforting pheromone released M2 oppression information to many alpha with ill intentions. "I only dare to secretly watch the excitement of this little white rabbit. The white rabbit is really cute. It looks like a duckling who is specially here to accompany this M2 high-level alpha." Xiao Wenying took Yan Yi and stood 25 meters away from a row of fixed targets. There was a shooting ground and a shooting platform. The vertical wall was full of all kinds of guns and different types of ammunition. Do you remember how to operate it? After saying that, Xiao Wenying put on his goggles and took a pistol at random. He pushed the painting into the safety and aimed it at the head of the fixed target and pressed the trigger. Want to see more interesting content? Please like it and leave a comment below. See how our boy slapped everyone on the training ground? Leave me alone. I'm looking for my rabbit. Lu Shijin once again looked for a small free child all over the world. The last episode mentioned Xiao Wenying taking Yan Yi to the training ground inside the manor. A group of alpha saw the rabbit and could not help but whistle and mock. But after Xiao Wenying's shock did not dare to say more, I saw him randomly take a pistol and point it at the fixed target and press the trigger. With an explosion, Xiao Wenying's finger gently fixed the target and fell down. Then another target rose quickly from its original position. Yan Yi calmly looked at the target. Xiao Wenying handed him the gun. Do you play for a while? Yan Yi stared at the gun in his hand and replied softly, Domestic 64 is small in power and small in painting capacity. It's just ordinary police. Xiao Wenying leaned over and stroked his hair. Then you go pick one you like, okay? Alpha, who was watching the excitement, panted for a while. Some had already taken off their goggles and turned around with a smile on their faces. Yan Yi stood on the wall and selected for a while. Then, in the eyes of the shocked crowd, he picked up a Thu Dare Thunder in the glass cabinet for display. He picked up a 50-pound heavy machine gun bullet and several interesting alpha whistled back. He was sarcastic. He did not install a retreat device. He dared to open the Thunder. The claws of the rabbit would fracture. Xiao Wenying quickly stopped him with a helpless expression and whispered softly in his ear, Baby, this thing can kill dinosaurs. It's expensive to maintain my training ground. Change it. Yan Yi glanced at him with disdain and threw the Thu Dare away casually. Yan Yi's slender and fair wrist picked it up easily. 2 empty guns can weigh 5 pounds of large caliber revolver M500. The ridicule of the spectators around them immediately weakened. Yan Yi pulled out the painting with one hand and skillfully pushed 5 magnum bullets into the painting. Xiao Wenying held his elbow. His weak body could not withstand 2 M500's hard and fierce back seat. Get out of the way. Yan Yi swept the muzzle away and pushed the safety on his shoulders. The 2 pistols rotated twice at the fingertips and fired at the moment when the muzzle stopped. The first row of 4 fixed targets fell down one after another and immediately bounced up. The 4 moving targets fell down in an instant when they stood up. Yan Yi's hands did not shake at all except for the safety. He gently blew the muzzle. Habitually, he stuck his gun into his tactical belt and realized that he was not wearing a tactical belt. There was a trace of fan ran in the eyes of the little rabbit, and then I realized that I hadn't worn a tactical belt in years, and then a series of perfect shots won all the alpha shock and applause. Xiao Wenying looked at the soft side profile of the little rabbit. When he put down the gun, his cold eyes showed innocence. He couldn't move his eyes for a long time. He began to understand why Lu Shijin fell in love with an Omega with such a low degree of compatibility with himself when he was young. Because he was simply too hot. On the other hand, several of Lu Shijin's right-hand men are all immersed in checking all the surveillance tapes in the city for 4 days. At this time, he has not slept for more than 24 hours. His subordinates tell him that the villa's security system is intact. Only during this period, all internal surveillance cameras have been shut down. It means that Yan Yi opened the door and was taken away by the intruder. He didn't resist and let the spider take him away. Where did he go? Why can't Yan Yi listen to his reason? Which alpha can keep calm when he knows that his Omega may be contaminated by others? Just seeing the surveillance videos before can make him crazy. Yan Yi must be deliberately retaliating against him. Perhaps the little rabbit gets too little attention, like a child who can't get attention. He must make some big noise to show his presence. The lop-eared rabbit Omega fake Y should have been pressed to deal with it, otherwise the damage to the body would be more serious. He just made the mistake of personally moving his hand and eager to let Yan Yi learn a lesson. He shouldn't have been so rude. But Bunny misunderstood. He thought he had caused him to lose his baby. Things shouldn't have turned out like this. Things turned out to be off track. Lu Jinchong sat on the sofa for a long time and pondered. Is he really wrong? The ashtray at hand is full of praise. Lu Shijin restrained himself from imagining a more terrifying situation. He did not dare to tell himself that it was because Yan Yi had just been forced to abort. In a state of double trauma, his mind and body were completely helpless against the spider. The more he dared not think about this idea, the more he could not get rid of it. He hugged his head that was about to explode and threw a table of documents to the ground. The phone rang at an inappropriate time. Lu Jinji's eyes immediately followed the past. After seeing the familiar number, his eyes darkened. Xia Pingshan was leaning on the sofa with a cigarette in his mouth. Brother Lu, my contract phone was silent for 3 seconds, and then suddenly, almost like, I'm looking for a fucking rabbit. Xia Pingshan took his phone away and waited for Lu Shangjin to finish shouting before he leaned back to his ear. He was now especially ashamed to kiss his brother in front of Lu Shangjin and got his friend's wife pregnant. Although Xia Jingshan promised him that he had not done anything out of line, he believed it. However, whether people believed it or not was a matter of fact. Speaking of which, his wife had lost her, but the mirror had also run away. Up until now, he still could not find her. Therefore, he said, "Well, look, first give me my contract. I can't find him. I don't sign anything." Lu Xiao, who has always been known for his calm and self-restraint, has a hoarse voice. People can hear a trace of weakness from the smoke. Xia Pingshan immediately asked the driver to send him to Changhui City. He pushed open the door of Lu Jinjin's office. I stepped on a document with a transparent cover, and then I saw that there were documents flying all over the floor, like a carpet, and there was no place to stay. Lu Zijin stared at his bloodshot eyes and typed on his laptop. Xia Pingshan walked over and took a look at Lu Zijin's computer. His expression froze, and he immediately closed the computer for him. "Are you crazy?" Xia Pingshan raised his voice and stared at him. "Why are you using PBB to open the location?" He was taken away by Xiao Wenying. Xiao Wenying has been active abroad. There is very little information in China. He doesn't need his own name to register anything. He doesn't need PBB permission to find out where he is. I think you don't know the situation. Xia Pingshan took out a USB drive from his pocket. Insert the card and enter a string of keys. He opens the latest file. There are some blurred photos in it. Through the back and some habitual gestures, he can identify Lu Lin. Lu Lin has been working in the laboratory of the differentiation base. Now most of the PBB data has fallen into his hands. He replaced the commander-in-chief and grew a PBB member as a gland hunter to search for high-level glands for him. How can you use PBB authority to ensure that he won't find out what you used to do? How can he close my eyes for a while? The high intensity of concentration for a long time makes him have a splitting headache. He has never felt the loss as clearly and bluntly as he does now. Even before the bunny ran away in anger, he was confident that he could coax him back, but he may have been captured and needs to take him home. He can't receive any news from Yan Yi. It must be because he was imprisoned. The little rabbit must miss him very much. He just can't contact him. He may be afraid. He may hide in a corner and cry and tremble. He needs to be hugged by his alpha. These days, there should be enough time for the little rabbit to reflect on himself. If the little rabbit jumps into his arms now, he will forgive him. Lu Shijin threw the computer aside and collapsed on the sofa tiredly. "Get out and leave me alone for a while." Xia Pingshan looked at him and wanted to say something but stopped. Just about to walk out of the office when suddenly heard Lu Shangjin said Xia Jingshan. I remember him. Xia Pingshan, like a soft spot was poked, suddenly turned around, cold face, asked, "What do you mean?" Lu Shijin's cold eyes are half open. "What do you think?" Xia Pingshan shouted at my brother. "I know him very well. First, he didn't do anything out of line. Second, he didn't interfere with your relationship. Your wife miscarried. This is something that people do. If I remember correctly, you and Yan Yi were together 10 years ago. How many people have changed around you in the past few years? You lost your wife. Why did you throw the pan at my mirror? I'll say it first. If you touch my mirror, we'll immediately hear the noise in the office. Hurry in and pull Xia Pingshan to the sofa on the other side. Bring tea and Bo to apologize. Director Xia, you should go to the restroom to rest for a while." The mobile phone rang inopportunely. Xia Pingshan looked down and saw that it was a small mirror. He did not care about Lu Jinji and quickly answered the stinky boy. "You still know that Xia Jingshan's originally clear voice opposite me has become a little haggard, as if he was looking for something tiredly for a long time. Brother, the driver said that you went to find Lu Shijin, and if he was there." Lu Shangjin took the phone from Xia Pingshan first. Xia Jingshan spoke first. "Lu Shangjin, I apologize, but not to you. I apologize to Yan Yi. I shouldn't have pestered Yan Yi because of the high compatibility. I shouldn't have asked others for his phone number and address. I shouldn't have given him flowers." Xia Jingshan suddenly raised his voice. Guilt and anger burst out at the same time. "The most I shouldn't have done was touch his back when he was most uncomfortable." His voice was haggard and hoarse. Even if he roared, there was no threat. Lu Jin was like falling into an ice cave. The pores on his body seemed to be cold to the body. On the other end of the phone, Xia Jingshan continued, "How did I know that touching it would make me fake pregnant?" There was a trace of hard pharyngeal gland dormant needle in his voice that was hard to detect. It made him feel so uncomfortable. I gave him comfort pheromones to comfort him. He was clearly asleep, but he was grateful and whispered, "Brother Jin." "Who is Brother Jin?" "No, you're the asshole who never gives a shit about him. How many times a day does he vomit? What do you feed him? Strawberries? Why don't you give him a bucket of ice water to torture him to death? You know he'll eat anything you feed him. Why don't you be patient and think about what he can and can't eat? You know A3 Omega has an instinct to depend on the marker. If you don't want to be responsible, why did you mark him? The phone was finally hung up by Lu Jinjin. He stood there, slumped on the couch, unable to think at all. He just wants the little rabbit to come back quickly. In fact, he can explain everything. This is really a misunderstanding. Xia Pingshan threw the phone aside and looked at Lu Shangjin with a sneer. If I were you, I would use GPS tracking to scan the whole country. Aren't you affectionate? You use it. Non-alpha tracking ability requires pheromone contact and general direction to facilitate in the case of unable to delimit the scope of the scanning area. The larger the use of pheromones, the more the gland energy will cause damage to the ability to swim. Mostly used in sniping and fixed point tracking, which fool will exhaust gland energy to carpet scanning. But Lu Jin's dim eyes suddenly lit up with a silver light. Summer with the sky to see his expression suddenly surprised you. You can't be serious. I will follow back. Before I could finish speaking, the whole office had a very high pheromone explosion. Narcissus was accompanied by Xiao Wenying when the M2 ability was activated on the land. Even if the security system of the villa was turned off, it still left a trace of spider web on the door handle. Shang Jin followed the smell of poppy pheromone to find the provincial wells where Xiao Wenying had been seen and expanded the search range to include similar pheromones in the suspect range. Xia Pingshan did not expect that he would really consume gland energy and watch the blood disappear from Lu Jinji's face. He picked up his cell phone and called the hospital to send an ambulance immediately. Lu Jinyi rose and knelt down, only to see cold sweat covering his cheeks instantly. The running water generally drops on the solid wood floor in front of Xiao Wenying, who may have used some means to shield pheromones. Lu Jinjin scanned more than 20 provinces and cities in his mind, but he did not find traces of Xiao Wenying. However, at the moment when he lost consciousness due to overdraft of gland energy, he found pheromones similar to Xiao Wenying. It's a juvenile spider omega pheromone. It's Mundala. On the other side, Xiao Wenying's estate. Xiao Wenying saw Yan Yi wearing a black sports vest in the equipment practice area of the gym. He concentrated on doing the high pull-down weight behind the neck. The maximum weight of the equipment used for alpha here is 200 kilograms. Although the rabbit is thin, the training marks on the body can be thought of. His heyday body mega due to body size restrictions. The muscles are not exaggerated. Soft and beautiful. Every time the arms pull down, the back profile forms an attractive angle. Occasionally a drop of sweat trickles down his back into his narrow waist. After finishing the last set of training, Yan Yi released his hand 200 kilograms. When a muffled sound fell back to the original position on the rubber pad, Xiao Wenying went over and took a bottle of fresh milk and threw it to him. Yan Yi took it in his hand for a while. Tired or not. Xiao Wenying sat on the equipment beside him and wiped the sweat off Yan Yi's nose. Yan Yi unscrewed the bottle of fresh milk and drank half a bottle. He replied, "I'm a little tired." Xiao Wenying teased and laughed evilly. "Let's take a shower together." Yan Yi ignored Xiao Wenying's teasing and asked calmly when to let me go. Xiao Wenying opened his hand. "This is not allowed. I can satisfy other conditions. For example, the weight of the equipment here is changed to 250 kilograms. Yan Yi was silent for a while. "Change it to 300, then go straight to the bathroom." Yan Yi took a shower and came out of the shower room. Xiao Wenying was sitting leisurely in the leisure area and flipping through fitness magazines. When he came out, he closed his magazine and prepared Iberian ham for lunch. Yan Yi didn't bother to pick up his eyelids. "Why didn't you prepare roast rabbit?" Xiao Wenying froze for a moment and frowned and smiled. "Sorry for my thoughtlessness. I immediately asked them to change to vegetarian food." Yan Yi looked at him in confusion. This spider seemed to have a good temper, but it always revealed the danger of touching the bottom line. It was hard to understand. Yan Yi held the railing leading to the ground floor and walked up the spiral stairs. Xiao Wenying suddenly turned around and extended his hand to Yan Yi. Yan Yi stopped and felt that he was blocking the way. Xiao Wenying stood on the steps and leaned over his knees to hold Yan Yi's lips with his fingertips. "You can't relax like this. You have to learn to enjoy life and get along with Alpha with high compatibility." At this time, Xiao Wenying's paralyzing toxin penetrated into his back along Guan Yi's slightly open mouth. Yan Yi hesitated for a moment and put his hand in Xiao Wenying's palm. At this moment, the alarm of the manor sounded rapidly. Xiao Wenying raised his eyelids. The amorous feelings in the peach blossom eyes disappeared into cold and sinister in an instant. "Wait for me in the restaurant." Xiao Wenying held Yan Yi's fingertips. "I went out to have a look and came back in a while." Yan Yi obediently went upstairs and several of his men ran over to tell Xiao Wenying that someone had destroyed the surveillance outside the training ground. Xiao Wenying lowered his voice and went to have a look. Several bodyguards with guns sneaked into the training ground. Xiao Wenying immediately followed them. The training ground was filled with the smell of blood. The bodies of the security personnel fell in all corners. 7 or 8 gland hunters broke into the training ground, and standing at the front was their leader, Cannibal Alp, M2 Cannibal Alf gland hunters, and the first price was M2 Cannibal Alf. It seems that Lu Jinjin has not found the door so quickly. Xiao Wenying relaxed a little. Sure enough, the eagle was blindfolded. The white rabbit was hard to catch. The cannibal saw the lazy Xiao Wenying sitting on the wrought iron railing. He smiled and revealed a row of sharp triangular fangs. You are the boss here. I heard that there are Omega of M2 level here. It seems that Yan Yi's glands have recovered to M2 level, alarming the gland hunter Xiao Wenying. I don't know what you're talking about. Maybe he came, but he probably left. His thick eyebrows were furrowed together. Boss, don't ask me. He pulled back the collar to reveal a circle of blue serial number PBB00036 on his neck. Xiao Wenying raised his eyebrows. However, it was PBB's human attack power. Cannibal Alpha's single combat power of the same level was very strong. Spiders, a race that was good at controlling and confusing, were difficult to fight head-on. All the ammo boxes are automatically locked and recovered when the training ground security system is triggered, but there's no way they're going to take their hard-earned A3 years. At this time, Xiao Wenying suddenly heard footsteps behind him. A figure bounced out from the railing beside him. Fish wrapped in bandages. Each hand held a Japanese two that had just been taken from the vertical wall. He jumped down from the high platform expressionlessly and slashed down with his blade. Without hesitation, he stabbed into the shoulder of the man-eater and blood splattered in, landing on Yan Yi's pale cheek. Xiao Wenying's gaze was fixed on Yan Yi. He was not afraid of the smell of blood at all. He attacked Yan Yi head-on with his man-eating J1 ability. His every move was fatal. This handsome, vicious, beautiful, and soft little rabbit was so beautiful. Like a red poppy in Xiao Wenying's heart, a cluster of enchanting flowers, this little rabbit should belong to him. In the training ground, the blood gas is soaring, and the broken limbs are scattered all over the ground. After seeing the alpha of the man-eater fall to the ground, Yan Yi draws a knife on the gland of the body and completely destroys the gland. After waving his hand, he throws off the sticky blood on the blade. He lifted the collar of Alpha with the tip of his knife to reveal the brand BB00036 on his neck. Looking back, he took a light glance at the 7 people surrounding himself. J1 Alpha felt that the threat to himself was 0. Therefore, he closed his knife and turned around. He was scared to turn around and run. However, the entrance to the entrance was sealed by a layer of sticky spider web. Any gap was blocked. The bodyguards with guns rushed forward to press the group of fleeing rats to the ground and took Xiao Wenying away one by one. At this time, the undercurrent in his chest had not calmed down yet. He also reached out and wanted to tuck a strand of hair in front of his forehead behind his ear for Yan Yi. The flashing blade of the knife suddenly raised Yan Yi's expressionless face and pointed the knife at him so that he could not approach half a step. It was the courtship pheromone wrapped in the smell of poppy flowers in the air. Yan Yi noticed that he only saw him softly asking me when I could go out. Xiao Wenying returned to his usual elegant appearance. His fingertips knocked on the back of the knife and raised the corner of his lips. He asked what he was doing. He tried to recall the memories in his mind, but it became a little chaotic. Obviously, last night's dinner was still vivid, but some things he could not remember clearly. The memory in my mind became a little chaotic. Obviously, last night's dinner was still vivid, but some things were not clear. Xiao Wenying turned sideways to avoid the blade and approached the white rabbit standing opposite. Let's go, the smell of blood here is too pungent. If you stay for a long time, you'll get a headache. As she said this, she gently held Yan Yi's neck and her fingertips indistinctly brushed against the glandular skin of Little Rabbit. A wisp of undetectable poison flowed through the glands and nerves into the other party's brain. Yan Yi sheathed the knife and threw it to Xiao Wenying. He said indifferently, "Not a bad knife, do you like it?" Xiao Wenying took him out of the training ground. I also collected several famous knives. Tomorrow, I will take you to the arsenal to see Yan Yi's confused eyes. I can't say anything unusual. I saw him muttering in a low voice and asking you, "Who are you?" "My surname is Xiao, you always call me when Jing." Xiao Wenying turned Yan Yi around and pressed it against the iron railing like the most natural couple lift their heads affectionately and have gentle and exciting eyes in peach blossoms. "I am your minister under your skirt." Yan Yi's empty eyes could not converge on the face in front of him. A strange cold face and Xiao Wenying overlapped. The cold and heroic features gradually blurred into a soft alpha face in front of him. Deep and beautiful, he held Xiao Wenying's cheek. The more he looked at it, the more familiar he felt. The cold face that had been engraved for many years seemed to have been erased by an eraser. The harder he tried to recall, the faster he erased it. It was like catching the last withered petal in the endless darkness. However, no matter how hard he tried, the petals still turned into ashes and disappeared from his palm. What exactly was it? Yan Yi hugged his head, curled up, and screamed, "It doesn't matter. I'm here." Xiao Wenying picked up the rabbit. Yan Yi suddenly hugged him tightly. He trembled in his arms. He put his face into his neck. His rapid breathing gently swept Xiao Wenying's skin. Xiao Wenying rubbed his pen. He had goosebumps on his arms. His heart and his chest seemed to be repeatedly touched by a soft feather. Sure enough, the charm of A3 Omega was irresistible. In the sword light, the blood in the battle, the slender waist, the ruthless eyes are amazing as if the starlight that shakes the pupil membrane, and when he throws himself into his arms, the alpha neck is weak. The rapid heartbeat tells his fear and grievance, but he can conquer a hard and vicious heart into tender spring water. Xiao Wenying thought that having such an Omega seemed to be a pretty good thing. He asked the servant to take Yan Yi to clean the blood on his body and change into a fresh pajamas. Xiao Wenying led him to his bedroom. Yan Yi stepped barefoot on the soft long hair carpet. He looked at his toes and thought, should I sleep here? Suddenly, Xiao Wenying took a pair of arms and kissed his ears. Why don't you come up? I asked him if he had ever seen me before. Xiao Wenying sat on the bed and pulled Yan Yi over to hold the rabbit in his lap, and he clasped his hands in his palm. Yan Yi noticed that he was wearing a platinum ring on the ring finger of his left hand. He was surprised and looked at his right hand. He was also wearing a similar ring. Xiao Wenying sighed in his ear. Actually, we have been married for a long time, but you have never liked my little rabbit ears. Xiao Wenying put his chin on his head and was slapped on his cheek by two little rabbit ears. It fell down very soft and hot. Yan Yi recalled in his mind for a while that there seemed to be such a thing. In his memory, he was indeed married, but he was a philandering rabbit. He often had a one-night stand with other alpha. Xiao Wenying buried his face in Yan Yi's shoulder and whispered, "What's wrong with me? Why don't you like me?" Yan Yi turned his head and saw this alpha peach blossom eyes angry with a layer of tears in his eyes. His charming eyes blinked and tears dripped on his shoulder. He trembled. Yan Yi turned around a little slowly and whispered, "You're not bad." Yan Yi turned around slowly and wiped Xiao Wenying's eyes. He didn't expect to do such a bad thing. Xiao Wenying pulled Yan Yi into her arms and let him feel his heart beating. In places Yan Yi couldn't see, the corners of his mouth couldn't help but curl up proudly. The expression of the little rabbit just now was too wonderful. The happy eyes were simply like a regret for his own death. The paralysis toxin he injected into the little rabbit's brain had reached the point where he had already produced a favorite memory under his guidance. He pressed down on Yan Yi and kissed his glands from behind. Yan Yi did not resist. Xiao Wenying's courtship pheromone and his own pheromone produced high compatibility, making Yan Yi feel comfortable and relaxed. "I like you." Xiao Wenying approached his ear from behind. "Can we live a good life in the future?" Yan Yi turned around and said yes. Xiao Wenying paused for a moment. At this moment, an idea suddenly appeared in his mind. He wanted to occupy the beautiful woman in front of him alone. He lowered his head and his sharp canine teeth instantly imprinted on Yan Yi's skin. Yan Yi grunted. A strong pheromone roar rushed into the body and the blood vessels. Xiao Wenying released a stronger courtship pheromone compatibility pheromone for a mental collapse. Omega cannot say that it feels pain, but the pain was immediately diluted by the comfort of high compatibility, the ultimate joy, which made him indulge in love and grief, the despair of losing his child, all blocked in his heart, almost driving him crazy. He silently wept and gradually lost his mind in his eyes. Forget it. Should all those chaotic memories that he dared not even think about be forgotten? Xiao Wenying untied the belt with one hand. At this moment, a child's hysterical voice suddenly broke out outside the half-closed bedroom door. Xiao Wenying was shocked. He gently patted Yan Yi's back and waited for me to finish. He quickly fastened his belt. "Don't go out of the bedroom. Open the door and see Xiao Wenqi fall outside the bedroom door crying out of breath." Xiao Wenying quickly leaned over to pick up his brother. "How did you come?" Xiao Wenqi cried and cried. Tears covered his tender face. "Don't bully the rabbit who saved Wenqi." Xiao Wenying was stunned for a moment. Xiao Wenqi cried and couldn't breathe. The car crashed into the rabbit and took away the stinky chicken house of Wenqi. "Don't bully him." After he finished, he took a pack of tissue in his hand and took it to the packaging bag of tissue in front of him. There was a faint milk candy fragrance on it. Xiao Wenying always had a slight smile on his face. Weekend evenings are packed with traffic for hundreds of meters, slow snakes wriggling. The pungent smell of gasoline and exhaust makes people anxious and irritable. It's like a virus that transpires in the gaps between the traffic jams. A Bentley Continental was in reverse in the emergency lane, and several police cars were chasing after Lu Jin, tiredly tearing off the medical tape on the back of his hand to reveal a blood cut accidentally made when he pulled out the fourth needle. He glanced in the rearview mirror at the police car chasing him and quickly got off the ramp. At this time, he suddenly recalled that when he was young, Jin Chang and Yan Yi drove together once. On the edge of a steep cliff, the two of them leaned against the car door to rest. Yan Yi sits on the hood and puts the helmet in the leg socket. The little rabbit ears jump back and smile and ask Jin Ge why I can't catch up with you. What skills do you have to teach me? Lu Shangjin proudly raises his eyebrows to catch up with me and I will teach you. Lu Shangjin smashed the steering wheel hard. He didn't want it anymore. He didn't want the little rabbit. He tried hard to chase him. He didn't want anything now. Yan Yi did slow man. He just wanted the little rabbit to come back quickly. Yan Yi hugged the little spider and thought that if he also had a child, it would definitely be an equally cute and beautiful little rabbit treasure. When the little spider suddenly came home, Yan Yi and the Spider Brothers had a happy dinner together as if they were a family. Halfway through the meal, he suddenly touched his belly. I think there should be a baby here. Where did he go? Yan Yi only ate a little, but he couldn't eat any more. He went to wash his hands and went straight back to the bedroom. He was curled up on his side in bed, and the chaotic images in his mind were mixed up in a jumble of colors, and then the door to the room was pushed open. Yan Yi opened his eyes slowly and found Xiao Wenying hugging Wen Qi, who was sleeping, and stuffing him into his arms. The little spider had just taken a bath. Her small hands and small face were warm. Her long eyelashes were obediently drooping. The pheromone on Yan Yi smashed her mouth and squeezed a small ball into Yan Yi's arm. Xiao Wenying sat by the bed and gently touched Wen Qi's soft hair. She said softly, "My parents were killed by gland hunters." At that time, Wen Qi was only 1.5 years old. Since he could talk, he has been asking me when my fathers will come back. I couldn't explain it to him. I could only say that my fathers turned into stars and went to the sky to look at Wen Qi. Was it very uncreative? Xiao Wenying smiled gently and calmly as if telling someone else's story. He was my most important relative. Xiao Wenying bent his index finger and touched Wen Qi's jelly face. You saved him. Sorry. I didn't know. Yan Yi shook his head. Actually, he doesn't remember anything about it. He held Wen Qi in his arms and released soft pheromones to make the soft and fragile little Omega feel safe and quiet. The little face buried in his arms was white and beautiful like a porcelain doll. It looked really fragile. Yan Yi tried to raise his fingertips and gently touched his soft little back. It was unbelievable. He thought if he had a child himself, it must be an equally cute and beautiful little rabbit treasure, so he has to protect this fragile little Omega well. He can't let anyone hurt him unconsciously. Yan Yi is tired and falls asleep in his arms. He holds Wen Qi Xiao Wenying and pulls a thin quilt for them. He bent over and carefully studied Xiao Bai Mian's sleeping face. She was quiet and peaceful. He carefully formed a ball and circled the little spider in his arms to protect Xiao Wenying. He kissed Yan Yi's forehead for a long time before he said sorry softly. After dawn, Xiao Wenying called the principal. He asked the principal to take it seriously, and he didn't want it to happen a second time, and he hung up, and he turned around and he was about to go back, and there was a dessert shop next door. Xiao Wenying himself doesn't like sweets, but he likes a honey mango layer in the store. He tells the pastry chef that he wants to pack 2 cakes. The pastry chef cuts the mango and laughs. Mr. has children at home. Children like to eat this dessert very much. Xiao Wenying leaned against the door and put his hands in his trouser pockets. The corners of his mouth curved up. He answered the pastry chef that he had children. And 2 of them. When Xiao Wenying returned to the manor, he saw Yan Yi holding Wen Qi and sitting under the maple tree in the courtyard. Wen Qi was holding an English homework book. He listened to Yan Yi with a mechanical pencil and wrote a few lines in the gap between the homework. He explained some grammar to Wen Qi, and the arrangement was clear and easy to understand. Wen Qi listened for a while and then fell asleep in Yan Yi's arms. Yan Yi picked up his eyes and saw Xiao Wenying. He smiled softly and said, "You're back." Xiao Wenying walked over and flicked Wen Qi's forehead. He sat next to Yan Yi, and he didn't listen seriously at all. Did he also sleep in class every day at school? Wen Qi covered his head and hated the police. Xiao Wenying looked at Yan Yi and turned around to show off to Xiao Wenying. "I said I love you in 8 languages. Xiao Wenying listened and looked at Yan Yi, who was holding Wen Qi, with a smile in his eyes. He didn't expect Xiao Mianzi to be more than a killing machine. This made him more and more impressed. He took out 2 round thin cardboard boxes, and Wen Qi's eyes lit up. He immediately took away a box and sat on the bench to open the ribbon. "What gift is it today?" Yan Yizhang took the pastry box and untied the ribbon. The fragrance of mango and honey suddenly came out. He received a gift. Xiao Wenying put his hand on the back of the bench and raised his eyes slightly. "I can listen to 8 languages. I love you." Yan Yi opened his mouth. He lowered his head again. He couldn't say something so explicit to anyone. "I love you. I love you." Wen Qi held a small spoon in his mouth and his eyes were round. He looked between Yan Yi and his brother and felt that his brother was so embarrassed. So he took a big mouthful of honey mango and said "love you" loudly. Xiao Wenying picked him up and kissed his cheek. "Love you, honey." Yan Yi looked at them gently and smiled. He lowered his head and ate his snacks in small bites. This kind of life is also very comfortable and safe, which is the peace he yearned for, but for some reason, he felt lost, as if something had been blown away by the wind and lost, even leaving no memory. During the May Day holiday, the school was particularly quiet. Only a few officers were on duty. There was a harsh scolding in the principal's office. Xiao Wenqi's class teacher, Teacher Zhang, was suspended for concealing Wenqi's near-death accident. After Zhang Zhouhong was severely scolded by the principal, he still had to hold a grade meeting to rectify the problem of teachers' dereliction of duty. Xiao Wenying only asked the principal to take this matter seriously. However, the principal was eager to curry favor with him and would make a mistake. He directly suspended Teacher Zhang. She stepped on her high heels and walked out of the school. This time she lost her job because she offended Xiao Wenying. She will not even be able to establish herself in this industry in the future. She walked to the side of the road and sat down with her arms folded. She did not understand why Xiao Wenqi was completely unscathed. Why did Xiao Wenying want to vent his anger on her? Can he break the life of an ordinary family for his brother? Zhang Zhouhong sat on the side of the road crying and enduring for many years. The grievances suddenly surged up. She did not notice that a Bentley parked 10 meters away was supported on the steering wheel and quietly looked at her. He had just come out of the hospital where Yan Yi had a physical examination. He relied on the pheromones left on the report sheet to find the doctor who wrote this examination report. Dr. Sun was tortured for half his life before he trembled and said the name of President Xiao. Lu Jinjin suddenly realized that everything was Xiao Wenying secretly sowing discord. His methods were too hidden, so that they unconsciously became more and more hostile until they separated. It turned out that Xiao Wenying had already targeted Yan Yi's A3 gland, and he didn't protect Yan Yi well. Lu Jinjin wiped the steering wheel hard. His red eyes were almost dripping blood. He couldn't sleep for a minute now. As long as he closed his eyes, he would hear Yan Yi's trembling cry for help and see his helpless face. He remembered that day when he pressed the rabbit to the ground. It made him feel worse than death. He wants to save the rabbit and go home. He wants to say sorry to the rabbit. It's all his fault. He will definitely love him and take good care of him in the future. Instead of making him tremble at everything, he'll reflect on his years of rudeness. Until now, Lu Shijin realized that only those who love him will give up everything he once owned for him. He completely failed the romantic pure heart that the little rabbit once burned. He thought of the day when he pressed the little rabbit to the ground and made him feel so much pain that he was worse than death. Lu Jinjin finally realized how wrong he was. He wanted to tell the little rabbit that he was sorry. It was all his fault. The little rabbit gave up everything he had for him, but he completely failed that pure and romantic heart. The female teacher sitting on the road has been crying for 10 minutes. Lu Jinjin is even more upset. He stayed for a while. If he was not afraid of the news, he would also like to sit on the road and cry for a while. He followed a trace of datura pheromone and found a spider omega similar to Xiao Wenying. The approximate range was defined in this primary school. The female teacher came from this school. Lu Jin pondered how to ask her if he could not alert the police. A taxi stopped in front of the female teacher before Lu Jin acted. Zhang Zhouhong waved her hand and covered her mouth. She swallowed and said that she would not take the taxi. The driver rolled down the window and poked his head out to greet Zhang Zhouhong. "Teacher Zhang, why do you hear a familiar voice here?" Zhang Zhouhong raised his head. "Master Chen? How come before you drive a taxi, Master Chen has been taking Wenqi to and from school? Zhang Zhouhong can often see him." Master Chen smiled bitterly. "I was fired by the boss. It should be the same thing as you. Get in the car. I'll change shifts. Let's find a restaurant and think of a way." Lu Zijin watched the female teacher get into the car, and he had excellent eyesight and could understand what they were saying by reading lips. After the taxi left, Lu Zijin also drove to follow. Master Chen and Teacher Zhang entered a small restaurant and Lu Jinjin followed them. As soon as he entered, there was a smell of oil smoke. He did not care about so much. He sat in the corner and casually ordered 2 dishes. He focused on looking at the 2 people and pouring bitter water to each other. "I saw Master Chen take a sip of beer. Boss Xiao fired me. Before his brother went to school, I had been sending him to school. One day, the boss promised to send Wenqi to school. Later, I don't know why he broke the appointment. The child fainted. I tried to persuade him, but he didn't get in the car and ran away. Who knew that something would happen?" Teacher Zhang only cried. There's a mix of people in the diner, and occasionally a flyer sneaks in and hands out a card to each table. He picked it up and read it, and it was a tip from the nearest gland hunter club, and it was a reward for gland hunters who were looking for high-level glands to sell and roam around the city, and high-level glands were scarce, and it was difficult for a few gland hunters to keep track of them. So they launched a mass reward to get more people to help them find reliable clues, and they could get a large reward if they succeeded in catching them. Zhang Zhouhong doesn't drink much. When she saw this little leaflet, subconsciously, I whispered to Master Chen that I was right. There's something you definitely don't know. Before the children organized a physical examination, I secretly took a look at Xiao Wenqi's file. Guess what I saw? Master Chen chewed peanuts and drank wine. Xiao Wenqi actually had M2 gland differentiation potential. Master Chen suddenly choked on a mouthful of beer after listening to it. Lu Shijin's expression changed slightly. No wonder the little spider was always closely protected by bodyguards. It turned out that his glands had not been differentiated and upgraded, and he did not have the ability to protect himself. Moreover, the school physical examination report was sealed immediately, and there were strict regulations that allowed the institution to privately test the gland level and differentiation potential of minors. Therefore, the file would never mark the differentiation potential of the tester. Lu Shijin narrowed his eyes and stared at the female teacher who was worried about her morality. He looked her up and down with suspicion. And then I saw her quietly fold a flyer and stuff it in her purse. The scene that appeared in front of him at this moment let Lu Shijin suffer a fatal blow. Lu Shijin lay on the steering wheel and slept for a while. The back of his suit and trouser legs that he hadn't changed in time were all wrinkled. When he woke up, he touched the stubble on his face and chin for a few days. He didn't shave for a few days. He turned to the co-pilot and touched the spare razor. The skin of the rabbit was very soft and tender. He couldn't prick it when he comforted him. He was long until his neck and chin felt smooth and clean. The land brocade pulled the collar back with one hand. Previously, he couldn't bear the tie clip deviating from the horizontal line. Now the messy tie can be hung freely. At the end of today's holiday, children were sent to Jinjin by their parents one after another, focusing on searching for that wisp of mandala information near the school. He guessed that a driver would send that little spider over. As long as he reached the mandala pheromone, he would definitely find Xiao Wenqi. 10 minutes later, Lu Shijin suddenly froze and began to feel the familiar smell in the air, which reminded him of a box of milk candy he received when he was a child. The rabbit suddenly jumped out and hugged him slimy. Brother Jin told him to put a sweet candy in his mouth. When Lu Jin opened the car door in a hurry, he almost stepped on nothing. He looked anxiously in the dense crowd until he saw a child running over with a milk sorbet. The fragrant smell of milk hit Lu Jingxin hard. At this moment, Lu Jingxin's eyes blurred. Hope was kindled again and again, like a piece of iron that had been bent repeatedly. He finally couldn't hold it anymore. He was broken at the waist. The land brocade lowered his head and his eyes were sad. There was a layer of water in his eyes. He suddenly remembered that he had come home one morning. I saw Yan Yi washing dishes in the kitchen wearing an apron, and the garbage bin was full of food that looked untouched. Yan Yi saw him come back and hurriedly wiped his hands and walked out with his mouth open, as if he wanted to ask something, but after hesitating for a while, he only asked him, "Are you hungry?" Now that he thought about it, his sad eyes actually contained grievances. However, at that time, he never thought that when he waited for a sumptuous dinner, he would wait for a small rabbit that would not return tonight. Would he be sad? Lu Jinyi punched the car door heavily. At this moment, he wished he could go back to the past and eat all the food that had not been touched. He rubbed the small rabbit into his arms and make up for all the things he owed all these years. At this moment he looked up and almost thought he was hallucinating for a moment. He could still see the traffic across the street from the crowded crowd at the school gate. A long, charming figure took off his helmet. Gray hair was blown up by the wind, 2 little rabbit ears were raised, and several creases were pressed out by the helmet. Yan Yan. Lu Shangjin couldn't help but chase after the crowd that was blocking his line of sight. A second later, he saw Yan Yi's body suddenly being pulled into his arms. Lu Shijin didn't even react. He was stunned to see Xiao Wenying wearing a tight leather coat sitting on a motorcycle. He took Yan Yi's waist from behind. He took off his helmet with one hand and kissed Yan Yi's small ear intimately. Yan Yi didn't cater but at the same time didn't refuse. Xiao Wenying gently lifted Wen Qi out of the car. He bent down and took out a bag of handmade milk candy from his pocket. He whispered softly and instructed him to eat it with the children. After that, he carefully stuffed the candy into Wen Qi's school bag. The little spider nodded obediently and turned around affectionately. He spoke to Yan Yi in a spoiled tone. He asked Tudu and his brother to pick me up on Friday. Yan Yi bent his eyes and touched his soft hair. As long as you listened carefully in school, I would promise you. Xiao Wenying raised the corner of his lips and revealed a sharp point of canine teeth. If there is an alpha kid bullying you in school, remember to call back. If you can't beat it, ask someone to help you call back and tell the teacher. It's too boring. Yan Yi turned around and gave him a shut-up look. Push Wenqi's small school bag. Go quickly. Spider happily said goodbye to them. He walked to the other side of the sidewalk and Yan Yi looked at him worriedly. How could he let such a small child cross the road by himself? The worry expressed by his true feelings would not lie, nor could it be disguised. Xiao Wenying stared at Yan Yi's side profile and unconsciously hugged him. He whispered softly in his ear, "Let's go back." We can't stay outside the manor for too long. Yan Yi nodded and gently said, Yan Yan. The urgent shouting scared both of them who were about to go back. Lu Jin avoided the crowded people and traffic. Don't come this way. The haggard face is as pale as paper, and the hoarse voice seems to have extreme pain. Yan Yi is unfamiliar and looks at him from a different place. He looks behind himself and then shows a confused expression to Xiao Wenying. He is calling me? Yan Yi looks sympathetically at Lu Xiangjun. How good-looking an elf spirit seems to be not very good. Xiao Wenying first stunned and then smiled badly. In the past, when people mentioned Lu Xiao's name, the first word that people thought of was that they could not find any inappropriate posts on him. At this moment, he really wanted to take a picture of Lu Xiangjun's current wolf-fox appearance and open his eyes to friends in the circle. Then Xiao Wenying took a fresh look at Lu Xiangjun. He leaned over and kissed Yan Yi on the cheek. He intended to kiss Yan Yi on the cheek, but Yan Yi avoided him uncomfortably, because he knew that Lu Zijin couldn't beat this situation. It was like hitting Lu Zijin head-on and making him bleed. He panted violently, his chest heaving uncontrollably, his eyes glaring so fiercely that they almost tore open the corners of his eyes, only to feel that someone had touched his most precious blue and white porcelain with fingerprints and handprints. In the past, Lu Xiangjun would rather break his precious porcelain than allow others to touch his own things. But now, he only felt sorry for Yan Yi, whether he was forced, threatened, or hated him to the core. Lu Xiangjun saw Yan Yi mount the motorcycle and saw him allow Xiao Wenying to put his hand on his waist and let him hold him. Yan Yi was preparing to start the motorcycle, but Lu Jinyi put one hand on the motorcycle's head. The heart of the disaster lasted for a long time. I saw him go crazy and ask the disaster. Long Yan Yan, where are you going? Yan Yi ignored him and turned the accelerator. The next second, the motorcycle roared and left. Yan Yan, don't you recognize me? Lu Shijin ran desperately to chase the motorcycle that was getting farther away until the green light was lit and his footsteps were blocked by traffic. His vision turned black, and his feet went soft. He took 2 steps forward and slowly squatted down while holding onto the traffic light. Yan Yi's confused and sympathetic gaze had been lingering in his mind. The eyes were distant and calm, as if they were strangers from 2 worlds that had never met, and suddenly there was a small hand holding a milk candy in the palm of it. Lu Jinyi was stunned. He looked up and saw a boy squatting in front of him. Xiao Wenqi was squatting in front of him. He was curiously tilting his head and sizing him up. Then he stretched out his hand holding the milk candy and blinked his eyes timidly. This is for you. Lu Shijin carefully took it like a treasure and held the cream candy in his palm. He looked at Wenqi and skipped across the road. 4 alpha bodyguards kept their distance and followed behind. Lu Shijin found a clean tissue and carefully wrapped the milk candy in his palm one by one, concentrating as if he were carving expensive gemstones. Through the tissue, the smell of milk sugar came out. At this moment, Lu Jingxi couldn't help tears falling from his eyes. He tore open the tissue. He wolfed down the small milk candy into his mouth and chewed hard. He chewed very slowly. I'm afraid he ate it carelessly and felt that he chewed hard like a wolf tearing his cheeks and bones. What's wrong with this? Lu Xiangjun's brain was filled with pain. Why didn't the rabbit come and hug him? Why would he go off with someone else? Did Bunny abandon him? Zhang Zhouhong with Xiao Wenqi just out of the school gate. Dozens of strong alpha immediately rushed towards them. What to do? Our little spider this time can escape? The last episode said, Lu Xiangjun watched Yan Yi and Xiao Wenying leave. How can I not understand why the little rabbit will go with others? Does the little rabbit not want him? Lu Xiangjun doesn't want to misunderstand Yan Yi anymore, but he still can't find Xiao Wenying's whereabouts. Since Xiao Wenying and Yan Yi left last time, their pheromones disappeared like they disappeared from the world. He wanted to ask the little spider Omeg, but the school was completely closed and militarized. There were bodyguards around the little spider. Lu Xiangjun didn't have a chance to get close. Therefore, he kept staring at the suspended female teacher for 3 days. In the past 3 days, Lu Zijin discovered that she had met Master Chen once again. Zhang Zhouhong specially took Master Chen to a corner where no one was looking around. She stuffed a roll of craft paper file into Master Chen's hand. Master Chen weighed the file and smiled with Zhang Zhouhong. He turned around and gave half of the bonus to each of them. My car is parked at the alley. Do you want to drive you? Zhang Zhouhong shook her head. No, let's go separately. We can't let anyone know that we met in private. Master Chen stopped talking and walked directly to the alley. Zhang Zhouhong chased 2 steps forward in a trance. Her trembling fingertips held her heart back. She still failed to repent. She took a few deep breaths to calm her restless mood. Tell yourself, since you've made up your mind, you can't turn back. Anyway, they're the ones who didn't do it first. Don't blame yourself for being unjust. Just as you're about to turn back, you're blocked by a piece of black metal. Zhang Zhouhong screamed and retreated 2 steps. She looked up at Lu Jinxi. She was sitting on a low wall 2 meters high. She held a Soyuzi gun with a sight removed in one hand and lifted her chin coldly against the skin of her neck. Zhang Zhouhong was stunned and slowly raised his hands. What are you going to do? Lu Jingjing did not beat around the bush and said bluntly that you did not dare to report it. You stole information from the school and wanted the driver to report the clues of high-level omega glands for you to retaliate against Xiao Wenying. Zhang Zhouhong had already become a frightened bird and planned to hide her secret. She was exposed to her face. She looked at Lu Shangjian in horror. No, I just asked Master Chen to give them clues. Xiao Wenying's background was so hard. Those gland hunters could not touch Xiao Wenqi's me. I just lacked money and said that she covered her face and cried. You didn't see how scary those people who came to collect debts with knives were. My daughter and I could only hide in the toilet and dare not make a sound. I had enough. Why do we have to pay off the debts of that useless man and pay off my mortgage and take care of my parents and children? Zhang Zhouhong had been crying so much that Lu Jingxin was so upset that he was about to have a manic attack. Lu Jingxin jumped down from the low wall and grabbed Zhang Zhouhong's chin to cover her mouth. She gritted her teeth hysterically and warned her to shut up. Don't bother me again. The security of Xiao Wenqi's primary school is extremely strict, but it is not 100% foolproof. Every Wednesday afternoon, the second class is Xiao Wenqi's physical education class. Children of this age are active and noisy. Generally, physical education classes only arrange 20 minutes of physical training. The remaining 20 minutes are left for children to move freely. Zhang Zhouhong's suspension has not yet been announced to the whole school. She took advantage of the free time to go to Xiao Wenqi's side when with the teacher out when was unprepared for his class teacher. Zhang Zhouhong pulled Wenqi's small hand and took him to the place where Lu Jin parking. When looked up and blinked his eyes and asked the teacher, "Why didn't you come to our class these days?" Zhang Zhouhong's thoughts were chaotic and she replied that something had happened at the teacher's house recently. She looked down at the obedient Wenqi child, who was also a treasure held in the palm of someone else's hand. Zhang Zhouhong's conscience began to feel uneasy. She gritted her teeth. In the end, he still pulled Wenqi back. Okay, Wenqi, let's go back to school. Lu Jinji saw that Zhang Zhouhong wanted to go back on her word and immediately got out of the car and started to do it himself. At this moment, the strong alpha aura around them quickly approached. At least 30 J1 level alpha rushed towards Zhang Zhouhong and the others from different directions. At least 30 J1 alphas rushed over from different directions, grabbed the text pool from Zhang Zhouhong's hand, put it in the black cloth bag, and turned around to escape. The child was scared. He kicked wildly in the bag and shouted for help from his brother. Lu Shangjian's expression turned cold as he closed the car door again. His heart was racing. He stepped on the accelerator and sped in the direction of a few high-level alphas' departure. He had mobilized so many people at once. He estimated that he had used most of the power of those gland hunters. This little spider was the only chip that could exchange words. Lu Shangjian would not let go of this opportunity. On the other hand, the maple leaves beside the hot spring were getting more and more dense and prosperous these days. Yan Yi felt that his illness seemed to be getting worse. He often sat by the bench in a daze, sitting for 3 or 4 hours, holding a leaf in his hand, sitting straight from the petiole until Zhang Mo bent. Who was that elf called him Yan Yan at the school gate? Yan Yi was stunned for a moment. Something flashed through his mind. The name Lu Shangjian appeared. Then his stomach reflexively ached. Why did he feel so uncomfortable when he thought of that person? That person, is he one of the alphas he once kept? He likes him very much and even gave him a gift. This elf that he abandoned looks so pitiful. Yan Yi plays with the ring on his right hand. In the manner, every meal is very delicate, but Yan Yi is getting thinner and thinner. His ring finger is so thin that he has to rely on his middle finger and little finger to hold the ring. He is surprised to find that there is a string of extremely fine flower tattoos on his ring finger. Endless love. He hugged his legs and sat in a group on the bench. Xiao Wenying gave him a new mobile phone so that he could easily contact himself. Yan Yi felt a little uncomfortable and wanted his alpha to come back and accompany him. When he picked up the phone, he subconsciously dialed a string of strange numbers. He should have saved Xiao Wenying's number. Who does this string of numbers belong to? The bunny tried to press the dial button, and there was a ball of bunny on the bench, and his little ears were flapping. After 12 rings, the number you dialed is not answered. Yan Yi puts down his mobile phone in confusion and continues to stare at the falling maple leaves in the hot spring pool. The hidden sound beside the hot spring was playing soft music, and the faint piano music came to his ears. He pulled himself together and asked the maid who was cleaning beside him what music it was. The maid stopped and wiped the sweat from her forehead. European and American woman's face is simple and deep, polite and smiling. Answer UV let love letter. Yan Yi is surprised and raises his rabbit ears to listen carefully. He clearly remembered a pair of hands riddled with shrapnel scars, slender knuckles elegantly pressed on the keys, and there was a desolate sense of disobedience that the music inside the manor could not reach outside. even if the land brocade was nearby. At this time, he was carrying an ordinary Souk sniper rifle, carrying an AK-47, crossing his hand with a document, bending back to hold Xiao Wenqi, and his other hand was leaning on the wall. He turned over lightly and his heart was robbed. Xiao Wenqi was shrinking in Lu Jinjin's arms. He was crying, "I want to go home. I want my brother to be unexpected." Lu Shijin didn't feel too upset and even released a little pacifying pheromone to him, but only a little. His glands had been overdrawn twice recently, and it was difficult to recover to their peak in a short time. There was no extra pheromone to give to other omegs. All these years, he's been like a lone wolf, wandering around the edge of darkness, taking one more step into the abyss, and he's become what he fears most, and it's actually the rabbit that's been pulling him around in the light. Scratched hand, pierced heart, still willing to pull him back from the depths of doom, dragging him back to his original world, telling himself that when he got Rabbit back, he would give all the comfort pheromones to Rabbit and would no longer leave Rabbit alone at home waiting for him late at night. The mobile phone suddenly shook. Lu Jingxian subconsciously took it out and took a look. It was an unfamiliar number. In fact, this kind of occasion is not suitable for answering the phone. However, Lu Shangjin was afraid of missing any news about Yan Yi. He even guessed that this phone call might be from Xiao Wenying. Lu Shangjin pressed the phone to answer the other party silently and did not open his mouth. It seemed that he was surprised that he had answered the phone and pursued countless gland hunters. When he saw the alpha, he immediately felt that his dignity as a pursuer had been challenged. Lu Shangjin doesn't care that his heart is beating loudly. Fang Buddha has already reached the weak milk candy through the phone. Is it you? Lu Shangjin doesn't have any hands to hold a gun. He keeps using his elbows to support himself against the low wall. He can't bear to put down his mobile phone. I'm sorry. I think I have the wrong number. It's really Yan Yi's voice. Lu Shangjin begged him not to hang up. No, that's right. Listen to my voice. It's me. Lu Shangjin. How can you not remember me? Stop it. I know I was wrong. I'm sorry. Yan Yi's voice was a little strange. Sorry, I just wanted to tell you that I may have gone overboard with you a few times before, but now I can only say that I'm sorry. How much do you want to break up with me? What can I compensate you for? Lu Shijin felt as if his head had been filled with a bottle of alcohol, and every part of his back hurt as if he had been thrown into a frying pan. Suddenly, his ribs hurt. Lu Jinzeng touched his right hand and his cell phone was covered in blood. It turned out that a bullet had grazed his ribs for about 10 seconds. Only then did Lu Jinzeng feel the pain as if he had cut off his finger. He could only silently put down his phone and flip over an abandoned wall. He took off his AK and fired backward, holding Xiao Wenqi in his arms to avoid bullets. He rolled around on the spot and rolled to another corner. Perhaps because he got a little pacifying pheromone, Xiao Wenqi calmed down and put his cheek on Lu Jinjin's shoulder. There was a strong sadness transmitted through his chest into the child's mind. Xiao Wenqi could feel that this person was very sad. The rabbit pointed a gun at Lu Shangjin, who used to love each other, but now he wants to fight. Lu Jingjin brought Xiao Wenqi to get rid of the gland hunter who pursued him. He climbed the dusty stairs to the top floor of a half-demolished building and slowed down to sit on the ground and breathe. He let the bullet wound under his ribs ooze blood drop by drop, and his back curved into a lonely arc. When he thought of his youth, he and Yan Yi had the most intense quarrel. The little rabbit also broke up with him because he said that the rabbit cooked badly. It tasted like frying candles and green peppers together. That was the first dish that little rabbit learned for him, but he said this to Lu Jin. I remember that Yan Yi was sad for a long time and sat on the balcony for a long time. He ignored him before breaking up. Little rabbit would only find a place at home to sulk. However, he wanted Lu Jin to be soft and coax him. Lu Jin took the clean plate to the balcony and put it in front of him. It tasted bad. He didn't say he wouldn't eat it. Yan Yi flattened his mouth and Lu Jinha took out a bowl of charred tomato scrambled eggs and proudly told Yan Yi, look, brother made it worse to eat. Finally, the little rabbit awkwardly threw itself into his arms and did not want to break up. When the two people argued, they would leave room no matter what, instead of a faint sentence on the phone like this, how much do you want to break up? Fei Liujin admitted that he was afraid of the little rabbit and insulted him like he used to, but he had nothing to say, because he had done similar things to Yan Yi. Xiao Wenqi looked at the blood on Lu Shangjin's hand. I lost my footing and fell on my ass. Say, are you okay? I feel like you're upset. Lu Jingxi looked at him and reached out his hand to pick him up by the collar. He quickly said what Xiao Wenying had done to Yan Yi. He could guess that it had something to do with the spider's paralysis ability. He wanted to know more. Wen Qi looked at him with tears in his eyes. Lu Jinjin spat out a secret thought. What can a child know? He really had a bad brain. Lu Jinjin put him back on the ground and pinched the bridge of his nose. He took out his mobile phone. I took a picture of Wen Qi's face and gritted my teeth. I sent the photo and location to the number I just called. Bring Yan Yi to exchange for your brother, then lean against the bottom of the wall and flip through the stolen incense file. If you only steal a prey from the gland hunter, you won't be chased by so many people. It seems that this stack of files is the important thing they can't lose. Lu Jin opens the file bag and inside it is a stack of thick list files, each one is accompanied by corresponding photos. Many of them are children as big as Wen Qi. There are smaller genders. Most of them are Omega. Most of them have differentiation potential above 1. Some are to be tested. Wen Qi crawled over and pointed to one of the photos. He said in horror that this is my deskmate. He has not come to school since the day before yesterday. When his father came to school to pack things for him, he was still crying. Lu Jinjin looked carefully. It was a soft gray rabbit. Soft little ears drooped lovingly. It was as pleasing as Yan Yi when he was a child. It seems that these are children targeted by gland hunters. Children have no ability to resist and are the easiest to capture, but most of the children in this aristocratic school have backgrounds that dare to attack them. I am afraid that there are powerful supporters behind them to provide weapons and resources for them. Therefore, they dare to be so comfortable. For the land brocade, roll up the documents and stuff them into the tactical belt. At this moment, he was not in the mood to think about anything else. There was nothing more important than finding Yan Yi. Lu Shangjin took out a plastic photo from his pocket and gently stroked it. Wen Qi crawled over to look at it with him and found out that the person in the photo was Mianchu. He wanted to tell Lu Shijin that Omega, who was laughing with his ears, was also very fond of him. He wanted Mianchu to be with his brother because this way, he could see Tutu every day. Suddenly, a drop of water hit the photo. He looked back at Lu Zijin and noticed that there were wet water marks on Alpha's face. At this moment, the dilapidated iron door on the rooftop was suddenly opened by a kick. Lu Shangjin vigilantly grabbed Wenqi and carried him to the edge of the roof. Xiao Wenying walked in. His eyes were red. He stared at Lu Shangjin as if staring at the poisonous insect of the natural enemy. The evil rune perfused the whole body. Wenqi clearly called his brother. Xiao Wenying's pupils trembled. He clenched his fists and said nervously, Lu Jinshi, don't stand there. Come here. There are many gland hunters nearby. Hand over Yan Yi. I won't make things difficult for a child. Hearing his name, Yan Yi walked out of the iron gate and saw him holding a desert eagle in his hand. He pointed his gun at Lu Shangjin and swept his cold gaze across Lu Shangjin's body. He said, do you still know that you are making things difficult for a child? Lu Shijin knew this look very well. He was judging whether he could kill the target without hurting people. They were partners for many years. They were familiar with each other's movements. Lu Shijin's heart cracked inch by inch. He returned to Yan Yijing and did not shoot. At first, he was just worried that blood would splash on Wen Qi. It would cast a shadow on the child's childhood. Later, it was because he saw the loneliness of the alpha face. Yan Yi covered his chest. It was clearly just an alpha that he was not familiar with. Why was there a dull pain here? At this moment, he saw Lu Shangjin's hand. The delicate silence was broken by a sudden succession of machine gun bullets, with old scars on his well-articulated hands and a wedding ring on his left ring finger. The random heavy machine gun bullets flew all over the sky. Lu Jinjin saw the red dot on his chest and suddenly turned over to avoid subconsciously pushing Wen Qi out of the sniper range. An explosive bomb was thrown onto the roof, and it exploded, and then the roof of the building, which was already half a ruin, suddenly toppled, and the pool of text screamed and slid out. Yan Yi came back to his senses and saw Xiao Wenying rushing out of the Wenqi regardless of everything. Before he knew it, he was hit in the shoulder, his gun was knocked out of his hand, and he was exposed to heavy machine gun fire. Yan Yi froze for a moment, forgetting that he had been hiding for a long time. He felt the familiar cold again. He was abandoned again. Yan Yi froze for a long time and touched his gland. He wanted to ask himself, A3 gland is very precious. The more people do not need to be protected, the more he is abandoned. However, why is he always the abandoned one? A hand reached out and Yan Yi's body suddenly slammed into the ground, but his head was not bumped. There was a warm arm pad under it. It turned out that Lu Shangjin wrapped his body and rolled into the shelter. At this moment, the roof collapsed and Lu Shangjin hugged Yan Yi and smashed the rubble on Lu Shangjin's back. Yan Yi's head was tightly pressed in Lu Shangjin's arms. His vision was black from the shock. A second later, his body was wrapped in a strong fragrance of narcissus mixed with the smell of blood. Lu Shangjin muttered to himself, it's me. I'm on the land. I'm holding Yan Yi in my arms. I'm sitting on the ground covered with dust and broken glass. Tell him if you have anything to say. He's putting his hand on Yan Yi's neck. While constantly releasing pacifying pheromones, Yan Yi touched Yan Yi from head to toe to confirm that there was no wound on the land. Jin sighed in relief when he was covered with dust and blood. When Yan Yi held this alpha palm, he also had old protruding scars on his face. When Yan Yi heard his heart beating, He saw that the alpha rib was soaked with blood and was still dripping blood. He didn't understand why he would get angry when he saw the alpha injured. Yan Yi grabbed the AK-47 hanging from Lu Shangjin's body and climbed up from Lu Shangjin's body with a gun in one hand and handed him a thin white hand. Lu Shangjin gently held Yan Yi's hand and stood up with the strength of his hand. His face was full of flattery. He thought Yan Yi would never let him hold his hand again in this life. Yan Yi lowered his head and checked the painting. He raised his eyes and curled his long eyelashes. He looked at Lu Shangjin and gave me bullets. Lu Shijin unrolled his suit jacket and hung 2 bullets for him to choose from. At the same time, he probed and asked, "Do you remember me now?" Yan Yi interrupted him and gave me the empty tip bullets. Lu Shijin was once given the empty tip bullets to him. The hand is neatly loaded with the magazine. The rabbit ear is sensitive to the sound of approaching. Yan Yi raises his right hand and lightly shoots at the 1 o'clock direction. When the trigger was pulled, a glandular hunter was shot through the heart and sent flying. Broken organs exploded. Flesh splattered. Lu Jin had to admit that the bunny had always been a trained top fighting machine. The figure in front of me coincides with the lover in my heart. At the beginning, Lu Jingwei was infatuated with him. One side was romantic. He held a gun in his hand. The rose in his mouth was Lu Jinjin. Let Yan Yi fold his wings and become a bird in a cage to satisfy his desire to control. When the little rabbit obediently changed Lu Jinjin, he was still dissatisfied. In these years, his capricious peace must have made the little rabbit fan extremely. Yan Yi jump up along the climbing rope just now and keep up with Lu Jinwei's chin. Lu Shijin jumped up and grabbed the rope and quickly climbed up. The other hand grabbed Yan Yi's waist and pulled him into his arms. He quickly flipped back to the collapsed roof. The feeling of being hugged is quite good. Although the occasion is not suitable, Yan Yi simply holds A's left hand and hangs it on Lu Shangjin's neck. Let him climb up and see Yan Yi. He did not refuse his touch and hug. Lu Shangjin lifted his lips and relaxed. There is still a chance to recover. As long as the little rabbit is willing to give him a chance, he will make up for what he did wrong. Yan Yi was late. He used his gun butt to hold Lu Shangjin's chin and asked if I used to spoil you so much. However, you are quite good looking. Lu Shangjin reacted for a while before he understood what Yan Yi was saying. He could not help but frown. What did the spider do to Yan Yi? How could his memory be confused like this? Doesn't he know that man-made memory disorder will gradually erode the nerves in the brain? This is harmful to Omega's body. Thinking of this, Lu Jin kissed his forehead and answered with difficulty. He was very spoiled to me. Now he regrets that he didn't cherish the sincerity of the little rabbit at that time. It was all waste paper. The top floor was full of gunfire. Heavy machine gun shells focused on one corner. Xiao Wenying tightly hugged Wen Qi, whose eyes were red from crying, while constantly releasing comforting pheromones to him. While holding him to avoid the chaotic bullets and drilling into the collapsed iron door, he saw that he was not in danger, and that he was not in danger. Xiao Wenying glanced at Yan Yi and continued to release comfort pheromones. He was in no mood to take care of others now. Wen Qi was frightened and kept shaking in his arms. Yan Yi's body trembled subconsciously as he followed Yan Yi downstairs and saw Xiao Wenying not waiting for him. Yan Yi bit his lips and broke free from Lu Shangjin's shackles. Lu Shangjin immediately pulled Yan Yi into his arms and bellowed angrily at Yan Yan. He's my Alf. Otherwise, who would I go with? Yan Yi's voice carries his own fear and anxiety of being abandoned. Xiao Wenying saw that he tightly locked the rabbit in his arms, but now he was holding the Wenqi himself and had no time to take care of other people. He knew that the A3 gland could not be snatched back today. Therefore, when he passed by Lu Jinjin, he sneered in a low voice. What did you catch him with? I marked him with me. He is now my Omeg. A few words with a soft tail sound are not light or heavy. On the land, Jin originally cracked his heart and smashed a hole. Xiao Wenying raised his hand and quietly connected to Yan Yi's gland through his forehead. He extracted all the toxins that had been injected before to cause memory confusion. He will hate your good luck. Xiao Wenying snorted and waved at them. He held Wenqi and turned down the stairs to escape. Lu Jinjin locked Yan Yi more tightly in his arms. The teeth marks left behind by the hair mark on the back of Yan Yi's neck were also uncovered, and an 8-legged spider totem mark appeared on Yan Yi's glands. The rage he'd been suppressing for days was suddenly ignited in a confined space and the narcissus pheromone wafted up. He swore. He wants to kill Xiao Wenying. At this time, Yan Yi stood as if his soul was out of his body, as if something had been released from his body. He looked at the ministry of Wen Jing for a long time and did not look back. Qing Peng stood dully in Beizhou. There was an alpha in the impression that he left like this. He resolutely threw him a back image. It was like driving to the suburbs and dropping a sick dog. In the future, whether he died or lived, he would be determined by heaven. After all, Lu Shijin saw his lost lonely expression and his eyes softened helplessly. He hurriedly put away his pheromone and did not chase Xiao Wenying. Instead, he narrowed his eyes and looked in the direction where he disappeared. He firmly engraved this figure in his mind. Lu Shangjin wrapped Yan Yi tightly in his clothes and his voice was trembling and hoarse. It was my fault. Let's go home. I'll give you 9 methods. He admitted that he had done everything to Yan Xuan, but he had never been willing to mark him. He let him become Lu Lin's prey. This was Lu Shangjin's sincere protection for the little free child. Even though this protection would have deteriorated, Lu Shangjin had never said anything again. He took him away before he resisted. Chang Hui's villa has been empty for a few days and there is no popularity. Lu Jinjin has been waiting for a storm that will come sooner or later. He even hopes that Yan Yi will give him a fierce fire. Even if the rabbit hits him, he can still do nothing to fight back. Yan Yi huddled in the corner of the sofa, his eyes were empty, and his only action was to hold his belly and show a confused expression. Lu Jinjin held the report of the diagnosis of false pregnancy in his hand. Slowly approaching him, he pointed to the words on the report and his voice was soft and low, not daring to provoke Yan Yi too much. Listen to me. You were faking pregnancy before. Brother Lu Jinsi didn't kill our child. Slowly sitting beside him, he pointed to the report and showed it to him. You see, there's no pregnancy, but if you want to have children, we're going to have one. The disordered fragments are like a drawer that has been turned upside down. I can't find what I want to find on the land. Jinbian releases enough appeasing pheromones. He approaches Yan Yi and puts his stiff body into his arms. He caresses him in a low voice to comfort you. Don't believe a false report. That's Xiao Wenying's provocation. The photos before are all his discord. Before he could finish his sentence, the examination report in his hand was suddenly pulled out. Yan Yi looked at the report and was lost in thought. We will have children in the future. I will always love you and love the baby. Lu Jinqing gently touched Yan Yi's arm. Please forgive me. Let's start over, okay? Yan Yi did not move his stem table. He did not strongly prick it. Instead, he sat in Lu Jinjin's arms. The spider mark on his neck. The more comfort pheromones Lu Jinjin released, the more painful it was. He suddenly remembered clearly that Xiao Wenying bit his neck and injected pheromones. Then he pressed him down. He slowly made everything ring out. Terrible memories made Yan Yi freeze. Don't touch me. The rabbit pushed the land brocade hard. So hard, he fell off the couch, and he was kneeling on the floor, retching, trying to get rid of all this nausea that went deep into his bones. Lu Shangjin wanted to get close to him. Yan Yi overturned the glass tea table. Bu Yi overturned the glass tea table and smashed everything that could be seen in the living room. Get lost. Get lost. He suddenly pushed Lu Shangjin out like a maniac. He screamed crazily. Alpha is something. Don't come near me. You're all the same. Disgusting. Get lost. Lu Shangjin's ashtray was thrown away and hit the wound on the side of the rib. The white gauze suddenly became a ball of blood red. He did not care about the pain. He took advantage of Yan Yi's absent-mindedness to hug him tightly and kiss his forehead. He let him beat and scold in his arms. He would not let go. I'm sorry. Lu Shijin's lips trembled and he kept repeating this word. Brother will avenge you. Don't be like this. Don't hurt yourself. Yan Yi gradually stopped. He sat on his knees with his hands down, and after a long time, he suddenly said, I don't want to see you. The smell of dry land brocade on his glands has disappeared. There's no A3. The higher gland instinct depends on the marker. The dazzling colors of Lu Jinjin in his eyes gradually became one with the gray world around him. At this moment, in his heart, Lu Jinjin is no longer the most special Alpha 7 Xiao Wenying. He feels that his soul seems to be wandering in the vast galaxy. After asking each star, there is no place for him. The clothing on his shoulder is warm. The brocade on the land is lowered. Only then can he realize. Escaping in silent tears, eyes no longer see a trace of light. Lu Shijin has completely collapsed. Not only does the little rabbit no longer recognize him, but he keeps looking for opportunities to self-harm. There is a light on in the room, and it is empty. Xia Jingshan was lying on the bed with an iron railing and his right hand was handcuffed to the bedside. He was bored and flipped through Yan Yi's notebook. He was locked up. Xia Jingshan had been bored for the past few days. His palm-sized notebook had been flipped through more than 10 times. Some of them were still Gu Wei's good words about not dating. Nothing was better than a rabbit, but he was not in his heart. There was a tear-stained page in the notebook, which read Brother Jin had been injured for me, plus a number of zeros written behind it, and he wished he could add 10,000 points to Lu Jin. He knew that his impulsive pursuit could not match the friendship of the past 10 years. The window lock was pulled open by a force of gravity. Xia Pingshan quietly flipped in and placed the insulated lunchbox beside his pillow. Eat it while it's hot. Xia Pingshan stood by the bed and looked down at him. He saw that his younger brother's body was fixed with iron rods and that he knew how to change rice. He took out a box of bruising cream from his pocket and threw it at Xia Jing's body. Look at him. What did I say? Xia Pingshan looked at him angrily and told him not to go out and cause trouble. You angered our father. Xia Jingshan poked his body and leaned against the iron railing. He crossed his legs and looked at his brother. Because he was busy locating Lu Jinfa at that time, he had no time to hide from Dad's people. Otherwise, Dad would not be able to catch me. Xia Pingshan closed his eyes and held his head. How can you, child? Xia Jingshan interrupted his brother before he could finish his sentence. Xia Pingshan paused for a moment. I want to go to the army. He sat silently at the foot of the bed for a long time before saying, that place is very bitter. He took a breath and went to school well. He didn't want to do anything else after graduation. He came to work at my place, or had you? You continued to study abroad and decided to start your own business. Xia Jingshan repeated it again. I wanted to go to PB. He told his brother that before he searched for Yan Yi all night, he found that many Omega Wu provinces had wonderful disappearances in these years. Most of the differentiation levels were at the J1 level. He guessed that this matter was inseparable from gland hunters. He wanted PBB to investigate clearly. Xia Pingshan thought about it. Then you finish your studies first. Lu Lin is afraid that he will usurp Gu Yuanxi's power. BB has been in turmoil recently. Even we can't feel how deep Qing Shui is. Xia Jingshan is backing down and asking for the second best thing. Then you help me ask Dad to let me go. I want to see Lu Jinyi. This is the last time. I will never cause trouble for you again. Xia Pingshan frowned. Dad is angry now. You have completely destroyed the Xia family's face for a rabbit. I will go to plead now. Later, I will be handcuffed next door. Xia Jingshan crosses his legs and lowers his head. Xia Pingshan smiled and now knew that he was aggrieved. After all, it was his own brother who watched him wear out his arrogance and lowered his head. Xia Pingshan actually had a few points. He could not bear to eat the rest of the meal first. I thought of a way. Shaking in his pocket, Xia Pingshan took out his mobile phone and looked down. It was Lu Jinlu. Xia Jingshan buried his head in his meal and heard Lu Shangjian look up and ask his brother if he had found it. Xia Pingshan mouthed back to him. It's none of your business. The voice from the phone sounds helpless. Can depression be cured? When Xia Pingshan arrived at Anfeia, Lu Jinjin had already sat on the bench in the hall for a long time. He kept pressing his hands to see the eyes that were sore from staying up too late. In the conference room, several experienced old professors gathered to inquire about Lu Jingxi's illness. He recognizes me sometimes. I just peel an apple for him. When I go back, I see him cutting his wrist with a razor blade. It doesn't seem to be suicide. It's self-mutilation. He's often angry. Everything in sight is smashed. He's asleep in the closet. I have to go back later. The old professors look at each other and give advice. Let him go back and use more comfort pheromones. Yan Yi's illness can be gradually controlled. Lu Jin falls into a chair and holds his head in pain. The spider is trying to use all the comfort pheromones in vain. There is no extra one for Yan Yi. A young doctor proposes to cover the mark. If you and the patient are more compatible than the marker, the contract can be covered. But there is a risk of failure. This statement is said. The atmosphere in the conference room is cold. Xia Pingshan winked at the doctor who gave the suggestion and patted Lu Jingxin's shoulder as if there was a blunt knife cutting back and forth in Lu Jingxin's heart. It was a long time before he opened his mouth. Our compatibility was very low. The final result is that Lu Shangjian will go back to take care of the patient for a period of time, and the doctor will be sent to check on Lu Shangjian when he walks out of the conference room in a daze. The young doctor secretly pulled Xia Pingshan and whispered, Hey, is this that Lu who used to have car fever and now is washing up in a golden basin? I saw their helicopter abroad. I rely on that eagle badge to be very impressive. Xia Pingshan put his arm on his shoulder. The little thing you just mentioned is enough to cover Lu Jinsha. Now you are in a bad mood and have no time to pay attention to you. The doctor asked curiously, how low is it? Xia Pingshan couldn't help but look behind him. No one took it as a joke and said 75%. It's ridiculous. I've never heard of 75% compatibility. They can still be together and they're dying. Look at Lu Shangjian. The whole circle is worried about him. Baby, look at me. Do you recognize me? This time, Xiao Mianzi had completely forgotten Lu Shangjian. Lu Shangjian dared not delay outside for too long. He did not find anyone to take care of Yan Yi because ordinary nannies could not carry Yan Yi's abnormal slaves when he was a patient. Senior bodyguards only had alpha candidates, which could arouse Yan Yi's destructive desire. The elevator rose from the garage to the first floor. Lu Jinchong took no time to change his shoes and take off his clothes. He ran to the storage room and gently opened the wardrobe. He saw Yan Yi lying in a ball. Lu Jinchong breathed a sigh of relief. On the way back, his right eye kept jumping, afraid that the little rabbit would make some big moves that would cause the sky to collapse. He was very prepared to see the villa become ruins. He had already asked his assistant to arrange a new house. Lu Shijin sat in the storeroom on a stool to stand on, gently touching the rabbit's tail and quietly accompanying him. Now he'll do anything as long as Bunny's okay. In his sleep, Yan Yi twitched. His calf suddenly tensed up. Little Rabbit's face wrinkled as he looked at his calf. He called out in a daze. Lu Shangjin hurriedly picked him up. He held his cramped calf and massaged it moderately. He lowered his head to comfort him that it didn't hurt. It would be fine soon. Brother was here. Yan Yi broke free from his drowsiness and muttered with his eyes wide open. He repeated, Brother Lu Shangjin, pick him up. Be good. Let's go eat something. 2 days ago, he hired a chef, but Yan Yi kicked him out. He ordered takeout. Yan Yi knocked them all over again. Later, he asked Lu Shangjin for his cell phone and said that he would call the police and say that his alpha was going to poison him with takeout. Lu Shangjin had no choice but to cook personally. Yan Yi's attitude towards Lu Shangjin was also cold and colder, but at least Lu Shangjin was the only alpha who could get close to him. All the tableware in the house had been replaced with wood. He hugged Yan Yi and shook his body slightly. He asked Yan Yan softly, would you like to eat some shrimp for calcium supplement for dinner? Yan Yi was stunned when he heard the prawns. He struggled frantically in Lu Shangjin's arms and tried to lift the table. Lu Shangjin grabbed his hand and pressed it against his chest. Be good and don't eat prawns. If you don't eat this, what do you want to eat? Yan Yi said he wanted to eat winter melon soup after a long time. Lu Shangjin hugged him and bowed his head to kiss his hair. Okay, let's eat winter melon soup today. Sit down and I'll make you some melon soup. After saying that, Lu Zijin rolled up his sleeves and walked towards the kitchen. Fortunately, fresh ingredients were delivered every day. He rummaged through the refrigerator and found a wax gourd wrapped in plastic wrap. However, while he was going to rummage through the refrigerator, he suddenly heard a noise and turned around to look at the scene in front of Yan Yi, which made his eyes split open. I saw Yan Yi break all the wooden plates on the dining table and was trying to poke the wooden tip through his palm. Don't move. Lu Shangjin quickly ran over and took the wooden plate away. He looked carefully at the little rabbit's palm. There was only a red mark in the palm that was not bleeding. At this moment, Lu Shangjin held back his fear and took a deep breath. Pick up Yan Yi and pat him on the back. Baby, don't be like this. But Yan Yi in his arms is indifferent and only talks faintly about winter melon soup. Lu Jinjin had to hold him to the empty cupboard beside the stove and look at it from time to time before searching the internet for a tutorial on making wax gourd soup. A hand used to sniper rifles and tactical daggers is a bit clumsy to cut wax gourd. Lu Shijin looked at Yan Yi and cut the wax gourd pieces into irregular shapes. Throw it all in boiling water and sit quietly on the cupboard as if only a small space makes him feel safe. After more than an hour of toiling, the winter melon soup is finally ready. Lu Shijin picked up Yan Yi with one hand and let him sit on his forearm with the other hand holding the winter melon soup and gently placing the soup on the dining table. Yan Yan came to eat. Lu Jinhu carried the rabbit and sat on his lap. He kept a spoonful of soup and blew it cold. He fed it to Yan Yi. Yan Yi took a sip and frowned. This was pumpkin soup. Lu Shangjin was stunned for a long time. He tried it himself. Except for the lack of salt, the taste was average, but it should be winter melon. Therefore, he coaxed softly. Don't make a fuss. It's winter melon. Yan Yi raised his round eyes and said softly, then I want to eat pumpkin soup. Lu Shangjin silently put the spoon back into the soup bowl and held Yan Yi under his armpit so that he could sit on his lap. Yan Yi tilted his head to one side. He held Yan Yi's face and asked Yan Yi to look into his eyes. Baby, look at me. Do you still recognize me? Baby, do you still recognize me? Yan Yi looked at him with his mouth slightly open and his eyes wide open. He didn't know that he was fixed on the ground. His eyes were light, and he wasn't looking at Lu Jinjin. Lu Shangjin's heart ached for him. He held his back and kissed his lips. Yan Yi lowered his eyes and face and threw it on Lu Shangjin's face. He stared at the ring on Lu Shangjin's left hand for a long time before muttering softly to himself. Lu Shijin's eyes are slightly wet. It's me. Little Rabbit looks down at this name in front of him. He doesn't understand why he looks so sad. At this moment, Yan Yi suddenly held his stomach as if to resist sudden pain. His body arched painfully as if there was a hand desperately pressing Lu Shangjin on his stomach. My stomach hurts so much. I'm sorry, my baby. Lu Shangjin hugged Yan Yi tightly. Brother Jin was wrong. Let's go upstairs and rest. On the ground, Jin Dance starts to make half-cold winter melon soup. I want to feed him. Yan Yi suddenly raises his eyelashes and reveals his deeply stabbed eyes. Suddenly, he raised his hand and knocked off the spoon in Lu Shangjin's hand. He lifted the bowl of soup and splashed it onto the ground. The wooden bowl rolled out a few meters away alone. Looking at the mess for a long time, Yan Yi said lightly, I don't like Lu Shangjin. He said, get down from the stunned Lu Shangjin. I went upstairs to go back to the storage room to find the wardrobe. Lu Jinjin was silent on the chair for a long time, and then he squatted down slowly to clean up the scattered dishes and soup on the ground. The closet in the storage room was tightly closed. Yan Yi nestled inside and felt for his phone from his pillow. He found that there was still a little bit of electricity left. He flipped through Weibo board. The only star he paid attention to was Yuan Mi. Recently, he posted an announcement. The picture was a marriage certificate with an alpha. There was also a photo of the two. Yan Yi carefully recalled for a long time. He vaguely remembered that this person once made him hate him. Fingertips repeatedly touched the picture of the marriage certificate and saved it to the album. There was a screenshot of a video phone in the mobile phone album. An alpha wearing a cross-collar bathrobe smiled gently at the camera. Yan Yi held his phone and watched it for a long time. The alpha eyebrows in this screenshot seemed to be deep. He seemed to have touched it countless times, but now he forgot the reason. Yan Yi suddenly had a severe headache. After the paralysis toxin faded, or the chaotic or clear memories all poured into his mind. Several painful memories that he would never forget were remembered again. In his mind, the humble Omega in the extreme is who the Omega in the memory of the land brocade presses the Omega under him strongly and presses him in front of the French window. The low sexy voice guides him to lower his waist. Children, the following plot of humiliation and joy of the little free son here because he skipped the one to see the full version of the details can find his way in the old place, but even so, he still wants to let Lu Jindo his alpha Yan Yi reach out to him and want to put the Omega address of the ancient pain in his mind. Yan Yi looked at him sadly and pitied him. When it was all over, Kishiki lit a cigarette and took a puff, slowly spit out a mouthful of white fog for a moment. There are still sparks in the smoke close to press the she. Even if the machine gun bullet pierced the body, it is better to be burned by this little bit of weak sparks, because it is Lu Jin, so Omega dare not avoid. Don't put up with the endless Yan Yi. Kneel down and block the skin on Omega's legs with both hands, trying to protect him from being burned. Yan Yi looked at Omega, whose tail was trembling in pain, and was taken back into his arms by Lu Jin. He was forbidden to move. He was forbidden to move. The thick and hot smoke was on his father's skin. Omega's eyes filled with tears, twitching, apologizing, begging for mercy. Sorry, sir, I was wrong. Lu Jinjin threw a cigarette butt and whispered, sorry to hurt you, but now you're just my deacon. And I hope you don't forget that I hate asking questions about marks. And take your pills so I don't get in trouble. The memory of the past made Yan Yi collapse. The little rabbit finally fired a gun at his gland. When he said that, little Mianzi remembered everything Lu Shangjin had done to him. He seemed to pull himself out and watched Lu Shangjin hold a cigarette butt on his body. He looked at the Omega in his memory kneeling on the cold floor, and Lu Jingxin's cell phone rang, and he went out to answer the phone and closed the office door coldly. See the rabbit tired to curl up lying on the floor. Yan Yi reached out to grab the memory of the rabbit collar. Sad to ask, what's the matter with you? Won't hurt yourself. That only the son heard the testimony of the frown smile. Tenderly and Yan Yi right hand 10 fingers looked at the wedding ring touch only said, I love him, I want to wait for him to come back. Love me. Yan Yi unbelievable asked, you can wait for it? I don't know if I can wait for it. Actually, I'm already a little tired, but I don't know why I have to wait all the time. The rabbit smiled tiredly at Yan Yi. The mobile phone in his palm fell. Yan Yi pressed his temple hard. I tried my best to contain my unbearable memories. My heart was awakened and sealed back. It wasn't me. It wasn't the Omega in my memory. It was so humble that he was afraid. He wanted to break into the memory and shoot himself who had compromised at that time. Yan Yi buried his head under his pillow and shivered. He felt that his waist seemed to be wrapped around his tightly strangled forearm again. He saw Lu Shangjin pressing down on his stomach and his legs were full of blood. His heart and lower abdomen were in terrible pain. Don't come near me. I'm not Yan Yi. Roll around in the closet with your head in your arms. I don't want to remember. He opened his eyes, frightened to see Xiao Wenying's hands wrapped around his wrist, his eyes shining with metallic luster, his lips smiling. 3 glands are really strong. Lu Lin also grabs his ankles and smiles at him to guide the differentiation of limbs. You should be able to succeed. Heartbeat, just endure. The heart of the disaster 2 Yu Yi slammed into the wardrobe wall with a thud, and the heart of the child fell out headfirst. Suddenly fell into a warm embrace from the bottom of the land Jin. Then he conveniently searched for small rabbit pickup, conveniently tied bunny pickup. Comfort touched his arm, whispered, afraid brother here. Yan Yi stared blankly at his tear-stained face. Lu Shangjin hugged him and wiped his tears. He didn't cry anymore. He didn't think about anything. I sent someone to buy pumpkin. I'll eat some later. Yan Yi curled up in Lu Shangjin's arms and held his collar tightly. Why didn't you mark me? I'm not afraid of gland hunters. PBB's strongest lop-eared rabbit. I don't need your tough protection. You're killing me so hard. You said you were tired of him. This appearance made Lu Jingxin's heart ache. I was blinded by the compatibility. I was vain. I was greedy for enjoyment. I wasn't tired of you. but now I really can't mark Lu Jingxin. Hold him tightly. He took a small bite on the skin on the side of the rabbit's neck and temporarily left a faint mark. The rabbit suddenly became quiet. He lowered his head, trying hard to see the mark. He reached out and carefully touched Lu Jin. Looking at him, he thought to himself, Yan Yi's glands have already been marked once. Even if he changed the alpha with a high degree of compatibility, he might not be able to cover them successfully. Before he was sure that he could mark them successfully again, he could not risk messing with his glands again. At this time, the assistant just sent Pumpkin to Lu Jin. Caress a handful of Yan Yi's hair waiting for me, come back soon. Then, while Yan Yi's spirit was temporarily stable, he went to pick up the pumpkin sent by his assistant. Yan Yi sat quietly in the storage room and waited for a while. He smiled faintly and gently shook his legs. He lowered his head and carefully touched the light teeth marks on his neck. Seeing the wardrobe facing the mirror, Yan Yi ran down the wardrobe and walked over shakily. He didn't know that Lu Shangjin was just temporarily comforting him and took a light bite as a mark. When he saw the faint teeth marks on his neck disappear in the mirror, the smile on Yan Yi's face slowly faded away, and the temperature disappeared. Why did it disappear? Just then, a cold voice rang in his ear, and our chemistry was so low, so low. Lu Shijin came back with a small pumpkin in his hand and planned to hold Yan Yi to the kitchen to open the door of the storage room, but he was shocked by the scene in front of him. The small pumpkin rolled out from the foot. Yan Yi was sitting in the closet, holding a gun hidden somewhere. His heart was racing because the muzzle was pointed horizontally at his glands. The gun without a silencer was fired loudly.